Hello?
Hey, hey, Pyro.
Hello. How's it
You hear me
going?
okay? Is it too loud or?
No, you're good. You're good. Sounds great. Well, let me check
Man.
the. Yeah, it looks good.
All right, sweet. Hey, man, awesome to speak to you for like the first time, like kind of voice to voice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess we have typed back and forth before, but never actually talked. So yeah, it's nice to finally talk to you, man.
Yeah, so you're a big proponent of like Argus being kind of like a first one. Your videos like that, like the idea of Azeroth and Argus being the two more primordial forces. So I thought I wanted to bring this to you because that's always been your stick. And when you were talking last week, not shtick, sorry, that was the wrong word. Like you're,
You're good. You're good.
yeah. Um, When you were talking last week, it's so compelling to hear what you have to say about Argus Panoptes and how they like to ripped apart his body and stuff to create life, essentially, right? And
Yeah.
it got me thinking about this inversion of history stuff that we experience with WoW sometimes. And we just got introduced to the idea of the Prime World Soul, which is so neat. Like the Titans themselves are searching for a Prime World Soul, and they think it's Azeroth.
Right.
But if there's two creator forces, and we know that there are two distinct realms, and I think maybe we'll learn a lot more about the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark Beyond and
I
why
hope.
they have those names, right? Isn't it weird that the Great Dark Beyond is commonly associated with the place that's like life, order, and light? Like that's almost like the Titan propaganda of it,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
it has this sinister name. Like, why do they call it that?
Yeah, it's like mysterious, like and I've noticed in other pop culture and media that phrase, the great beyond or the dark beyond or whatever, or the conjunction of both of them, the great dark beyond, is not uncommon in terms of where people think they go when they die. So I think that's like a
Interesting.
really interesting thing as well, is like they call it the great dark beyond, and it could just be a thematic thing there, but I do think that's weird how like that's often what people kind of say when they pass on.
And then counter to that, the Twisting Nether is based on the ether in our world, which is like a spiritual dimension. And in Chronicle, it's straight up called the
An
astral
astral.
dimension,
Yep, yep. And
which was
Metzen said that
interesting
on
because
stage as well.
aren't Titan world souls fairly astral looking?
Extremely. Yep.
So I started thinking about this a bit, about what we're being told about this inversion of history. And so I want to pivot a little bit and first promote Transformers 1 was the most epic fucking movie I've ever seen. I
Really?
felt like I was in Zareth Mortis and watching an Earthen story about 1984. Like it was, I can't even promote the movie enough. And do you know about Transformers lore and how it's like Chris Metzen, of course, you know the familiarity of how he's wrote for the franchise and
Hmm.
stuff.
I know a little bit about like the two big head entities and stuff like that. I don't know
Yeah,
a
Unicron and
ton.
Primus.
Yes. Yeah. Primus being
So
one of them's a hilarious thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I think that was like considering, oh gosh, if you do see this movie, it's almost like you're watching a bunch of Zovals run around. They all have like these empty chests and their face looks like Zoval. Because it's all 3D and looks pretty real. So I'm going to send you this cool picture here. It's like a comic book of the Primus and Unicron fighting, just for its context. If we talk about this, people can look at it. Oops, I sent it as a, oh no, it worked.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, once you have that up, you can read it if you want. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll read this here. So I don't know who this is about here, but this guy's got horns, which is that's a good start. It says he had to destroy the last of the dark gods, the chaos bringer, Unicron. No easy task even for one as mighty as Primus. Unicron existed purely to destroy and had become very good at it. Injured, his energy and form discorporated, uh Primus took the battle to the astral plane and seemingly fared no better there. With his life glow all but extinguished, Primus fled towards the real world. Unicron, close behind him, eager for the kill. Too eager, instead of materializing in their energy forms, Primus led them into lifeless asteroids, imprisoning their essences for all eternity. Primus's intricate, what's that say, snare was complete. In time, Primus learned not only to live with his sacrifice, but also to psionically shape his metal prison into a world he called Cybertron. Oh, interesting. So they get turned into asteroids that turn into worlds. Okay.
Yeah, And isn't kind of like the Eyes of the Earth Mother story is what this has reminded me of since I heard about this, is thinking how you have this being who's wandering the cosmos, kind of looking for a place of haven from the dark whispers which were ever present. And she decides to craft a home and then like turn herself into the world is kind of what that seems to imply. Maybe that's a stretch there, but
I also get
if you
vibes of what happened with Norganon when the Titan Pantheon fought Sargeras, and then they were slain, and then Norganon, weaves that spell over them and sends them careening through the cosmos. To me, that almost sounds like shooting stars or like falling meteors or something like that as well, too. So like
yeah.
just another thing. That's kind of what that's what I was thinking as well there.
Um, So if we were to like, follow that line of Transformers and which character represents Primus and which one represents Unicron, the surface level thinking of it, if we were thinking like, oh, Metzen kind of ripped it off, which he's really good at doing, it would be like Argus is the Unicron, where we saw him as like death and destruction, the Unmaker, and Azeroth is the light of creation.
Right.
But I started to think this is where my brain kind of broke because everything you were talking about with like how the old gods have to be linked to life to some degree, but we know that they kind of do seem related to shadow as a force at the same time. And then Argus seemingly having a link to the Emerald Dream, how he's the Emerald Star, and how his only solace lay within the dream. How, remember that time I pointed out, and it looks like he has giant antlers, perhaps. Like they're like these faux antlers, celestial ones. If you just, and you're wielding a scythe, the scythe of Elune connections. I started to think about what the Titans consider chaos, and what if the histories we've been learning. So I started thinking about these two realms, the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark Beyond. Have we ever gotten indications about what forces mainly govern them? Because I opened up by saying like, oh, we think about it this way, like, and then I made this chart, and I think I jumped the gun because I went and put like light, order, and life in the Great Dark Beyond, as contradictory as that sounds, and I even had the Great Dark Beyond shown like the yellow side, whereas the Twisting Nether was shadow, death, and disorder.
Right.
And
I've fallen into that trap too, but I've always felt like one of them needs to be switched. Like,
And so I looked at Zera's quotes from Zereth Mortis and realized there's a really interesting way to link these, and I sent it here, to each of the realms and what they kind of represent, almost from a bit of a sadistic point of view, or maybe nihilistic would be the right term. So if we think about death in what we just experienced, Shadowlands, it's actually more so related to soul and eternalism, right? Like being like it's not just about the life is what represents decay in weird ways, and death represents spirit. So a realm of death, light, and order sounds like an astral plane to me, in that sense, like of souls, and then the Great Dark Beyond would be where life is. But it's also the dark beyond where shadows and demons come in to try to always bring about the end of existence and stuff. It's almost as brutal. But Odin says, life is chaos. It must be controlled. And it got me thinking that you talk about taking parts of Argus, like his brain, for example, and I was looking at the paracasual fragment of Sessional that shows up in the Dragonflight time rifts.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing to really drop for us.
I couldn't believe, dude. I could have.
It's
crazy.
It's bleeding, right? And it has the life growing out of it.
Yeah, like the staff itself or the paracausal fragment?
Well, the icon, if you've seen it, it looks like it's a little like white alabaster piece of bone with red veins and a
oh yeah, sure, definitely 100% is a bone. That's
so they're showing us like, this is what her staff will look like. And so I've been thinking about the story of Adam and Eve, how they take one of Adam's ribs to create Eve. Have you compared this to Sessional and thought about if she took this from Argus?
No, but that's a really, really phenomenal idea. It is a shepherd's crook, and I do think, yeah, yes, essentially it's a scythe, and I do think that fucking quote, the blind queen wields a scepter of bone, from the deep she calls forth doom. I'm pretty fucking sure that's talking about Eonar. So the fact that this bone fragment is also, I didn't even realize that that's the icon for the paracausal fragment. That's pretty fucking insane. And also, could it have come from Argus? Absolutely, because as
The
they've
Emerald Star.
yeah, I mean, yes, and as they've told us, Argus was made, at least as we're led to believe, he's made into the form of death. And not just
Yeah.
any death, it's like the blue orderly death, which frankly looks way more, it's more like domination than anything.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that Argus held a different, more chaotic form, probably more likely the black and red version that we see. However, the idea that it was taken from him is not one that I've ever thought about. No,
So
that's not
think
something I've ever
about
thought about.
the lesson of the Dark Titan and advice of the Dark Titan. Advice is from Legion before we knew about Argus being a world soul. And that one has the text. It's a legendary item for restoration druids, like a piece you equip.
Mhm.
And the flavor text says, "Patience, young one, and one day you shall have it all."
Yep.
And then there's the lesson of the Dark Titans from the power in Shadowlands, which has the blue and gold leaf. And I guess I should probably try to send that to you if you're bringing
I
this
got it.
stuff up. I'm not sure. Cool. So the blue and gold leaf, like the fact that these are both restoration legendaries. And I remember what you said about linking the story of Lukao and Kevo Yaseti to Argus as being
Oh, dude,
the regeneration thing,
I
right?
fucked
And
that
it's
up
hard to
so
think about
bad.
this.
I fucked that up
Oh,
so
did
bad.
ya?
Yes, because my initial interpretation was like, oh, this is Anshe and Musha. But then someone came to my stream, they're like, Pyro, I really think that the character that's broken up into pieces, I think that's Argus. And I was like, yo, that's what. How did I not see that? But my initial interpretation was not that. But upon revisiting it, I agree. I definitely agree. Ketsuya CV in the I can't remember the other one's name.
Lukao.
Lukao, yeah, those are absolutely 100% a fractal of Sargeras and Argus. I agree, and Lukao was, of course, fragmented into a bunch of different pieces. It also makes sense as to why, because during the quest, I was like, why is Lukao using what appears to be like Fellfire magic? And when you look at it from that angle of it being Sargeras and Argus, that makes way more sense.
Right. It does. Yeah, there's like A&R wielding the weird fire, and so I'm gonna get to some
Yeah.
stuff there too.
It's almost like she
Quote some
stole
pictures.
chaos or something from Argus, or like stole that. I like what you're. That's what you're getting at, right? That like this power that we perceive as like originally hers maybe is not hers at all, and that power I would assume is perhaps growth. Because demons are used, they regenerate demons through him. They basically regrow their bodies. It's chaotic. It's so I don't know, or yeah, I don't know, something like that. It's kind of where my mind goes. But I don't know if you had more to that. If you wanted to continue, sorry, I kind of
Continue. Sorry, my bad. One sec there. I think that mic's back on form here. Pardon me.
You're
I
okay.
had a bit of an Jesus shaping of the world started playing. All right, so I was trying to send some links. I guess I was sending reverberations to my thing here. I know I have sensitive cords, and it took my mic out. Oh shoot! Some stuff's wrong. Pardon me.
You're good. It's all good, man.
It might be in that. To go to my.
And it's so interesting because it's easy to look at Argus and go, oh yeah, that's a lot like Galactus. Like, I didn't think that originally because I'm not a big Marvel guy, but when Taliesin said it, I was like, oh shit, like he actually does look like Galactus. But the interpretation of, especially with Argus, because he has like a second set. See, Galactus just has the two horns that come out from either side, where Argus is split into another set, which looks a hell of a lot more like antlers.
Yeah, I'm back on track here. Technical difficulties. Right.
No, you're good. And that almost then makes me wonder how related Argus is to Elune. But yeah, I have these
That's where I've been getting. So in Transformers, above Unicron and Primus, there's this character called G1, who's like just like the one, and that would be the balance between them. So we can separate Elune from Azeroth here, and I have a bit of an interesting take on Azeroth here, because if she represents just like light, order, and technically death, it sets this idea like this. The Titans are coming into the great dark beyond, like as we just saw in the first disc. They're searching for the prime world soul that will bring order, light to the cosmos. And if what if there's a prime world soul for each of these realms, though? I guess is something I was going to get at, and that Argus is probably the prime world soul of the great dark beyond, life, shadow, and chaos.
I like
And
that. I like that.
Azeroth is the prime world soul from. So in the story here, what we're actually like, so it's not so cut and dry from the Transformers one, because to the Autobots, quote unquote, who you'd think of as the Titans,
Right.
the Titans themselves are all about stasis. They're not about transformation. And who are the literal transformers in World of Warcraft? Druids. So druids linking to Argus and thinking about him, like, and look at the Draenei. They're like fawn people, they're stag-like in a lot of ways.
And blue. And the most and the most marked weapons of Elune are scythes.
Yeah.
The
So you'd have
sacrificial
like,
dagger that traps Xalatath, who's literally using the phrase "the end of all things" now, is also shaped like a moon.
yeah, and I think the Argus being twisted into, like, I should probably address that part of it. That I've always
I
tried to
hate that
focus
lore.
on. Oh, yeah, I get it. I get it because it does disrupt things, but that's also what's allowing for us to kind of have this different
True.
thought. We're like, well, what
True.
was he before, And
Yeah.
because he's played out like a victim for sure. Like
Oh
from the day
yeah,
that he
dude.
was introduced.
Oh yeah.
And so thinking about like what was he stripped of, and I could really mess with this idea otherwise, like because like I said, I got stuck on it. It starts changing the way you look at all of the life forces for other things I was going to speculate on. I was like, oh my gosh, like Nathrezim are a force of life. What? Like technically dead lords and they're unbound chaos. Because if you want to put it this way, like what he represents is to get back to the Transformers thing, yeah, like so the Titans are actually more like the Unicron story if you think about it, because what happens here is that Primus stays asleep and then creates the Transformers, whereas Unicron eventually tries to awaken and become a giant Transformer to destroy the cosmos again, and the Transformers have to fight him. So in a way, the World Soul stuff is inspired from this idea of like Unicron. Are you familiar with like how much One for One? I'll bring it up here. Unicron destroying Cybertron is One for One to Sargeras stabbing Azeroth. You familiar with this? Okay. But to probably blow your mind here. The guy, and even the voices of the two are pretty much identical. There's a whole scene where I don't need to show you the one of Sargeras next to it, I bet. I just sent in Discord.
I mean, even his hand position and stuff is like reminiscent of how Sargeras raises his hand for the sword and things like that.
Yeah, with the wings and
It's got
Unicron
horns.
is like the chaos destructor of all things, sort of. And Sargeras did take on that role in the Warcraft universe.
Right,
In
Sargeras the
beginning.
Destroyer.
Of course, just for the people that go back and forth, here's the One for One. But in a way, like all of the Titans are technically taking on the role of like the Unicron here. And I started thinking about the ideas that their goal is to come and destroy life, essentially. They're coming to destroy chaos and life. Because as Odin says, like he doesn't see them as different. Life is chaos and it has to be completely pruned. So they'll protect and accept whatever falls underneath their, purview. But in a way, it's like unbound life is what Argus perhaps represented before. Regrowth,
Yeah, pure unrestrained chaos. And I think that that's potentially why the energy in the sword has led to things like Belladar shifting, and all of this massive change that's happened in the world is potentially because that reverted energy, if that's what happened when Aman'Thul does the time collapse spell thing, that black and red apocalyptic energy, I think maybe that is the the root essence, and they call that fel, right? I mean, that's what Chronicle kept calling it. Argus's fel powers, his fel whatever. It's like, what? Like what is, and we consider fel to be chaos, right? But what does that mean? Like fel's always green, right? So
yeah.
I thought that was so interesting, and it kind of just gives me those vibes of like, yeah, he is just flat out untamed fucking chaos, and like those other
It's interesting
two
how
things that
a
might
ruby dragonflight
include. Yeah.
Sorry about that. The
No,
ruby
you're good.
dragonflight being like crimson, red, right? Like what's with that? They're the life ones. So is there
Yeah.
something with Fel and like binding life that like they're
Yes,
they're
same
kind of wrapping a lot of stuff up.
the same thing that happens with like the Aljathar Academy boss, where you go in there and you have one who's casting life magic and the other who's casting nature. And I'm looking at that like, well, like, wait a second, like, since when are we separating these two things now? Like, this is now different, and so it's like, makes that implication as well that Elune is nature and that Alexstrasza is life and is somehow separate. And I mean, Sargeras, I don't know, I think it's pretty weird. Sargeras looks, a lot more red and maybe even life bindery color than someone like Eonar. So that's always been fucking weird. It's always been strange as well, because we were told for years that Eonar was the only one who had two dragon aspects in both Ysera and Elune. Or sorry, Eonar, not Eonar. Fuck, Alexstrasza. They're all the same character to me.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
I get you.
Yeah. But yes, and like someone just said in chat, Call Me Only said the idea of the title of Life Binder seems to be imprisonment. Bind life,
Right.
bind life to what? Right. So it kind of seems, like maybe Eonar and maybe an accomplice or someone even behind the scenes of that, imprisoned and basically ordered the fuck out of Argus. And that, maybe that some of those powers that they have, if not all of them, maybe they're stolen or derived or something from Argus in some way, or at least something like Sessional, like you were saying.
Hmm. So what I'm sending you here is just an example of like trying to almost be a Zereth Mortis apologist, if you know what I mean. Like the people who are and maybe rightfully so, paying closer attention to what say Zereth said here. And I don't know if anybody else has tried to link these each. Like she paired 3 of the forces together in 2 sets of pairs, right? And
Yeah, have
or
you
like
seen
linked those to a realm yet? Sorry, go ahead.
this? I have a couple different interpretive attempts at this.
Yeah, because I guess I'm almost trying to correct another one I was doing. That's the fun of it. Is like I knew I was already had something wrong already.
You're like,
it was a matter
wait.
of like, well, how much more can it evolve? And thinking about it.
Yeah, I kept
Look at you.
finding that like something about it didn't feel right. Like I would look at, in my head, the interpretation that I had would link them together, but then I'd look at what Cesura said and I'm like, wait, that doesn't line up. It always felt like one of them needed to be switched. Like that, like almost like light and void should be switched, where like Void, Ortis, and Vide, I don't know. Or no, I have that wrong. It would be, oh Jesus, I can't understand my own chart anymore. Anyway, there's something. Anyway, there's something that there was something that I couldn't get right. I kept feeling like, no, Cesare says it this way, and I kept switching them, and I'm pretty fucking sure that it was the position of, I thought it was the position of light and void. But anyway, yeah. To go back to your thing here. Yes.
So in a way, it's weird that we could think of what we might traditionally try to think of Argus as like the Unicron, the Prime Destroyer in this case. He might actually be the creator god, who is just very chaotic.
Xaxxas doesn't know. Xaxxas doesn't know.
We talked about this 7 years ago. Kind of thing. No,
bro. Do you guys remember the Taliesin and Evitel art thing? Remember guys, when I made Argus the Maker? I fucking told you guys this shit. Where can I even find it? One of my yes, Xaxxas, one of my first theories about Argus that I kind of let go after basically being shit on by the community for it was I recolored him into the red and gold version that he was when he stands up in the opening cinematic of the fight. And I named him Argus the Maker. And I gave him golden eyes and like red skin and golden blood through his veins and all this stuff. And yeah, I got memed on for that. But what I can't believe that after all of this that you just said back to me, what if he was a creator?
Yeah,
That's
and in a way,
fucking
Azeroth is
crazy.
actually the destroyer goddess.
Yep, that
Because
is fucking
she's
crazy.
being woken up. Like the Titans want to wake her up to become a giant battle god like Unicron. In a way, it's inverted and it's like a hippie thing. And
Yep.
another thing I forgot to say is that
Wow.
in our story here with the Primus and Unicron, he puts him into hibernation. It's Primus who weaves the spell and puts them into planets. Well, hibernation is a druid spell. Just saying.
Yeah, that's
Thinking about
interesting. And of course, we
Argus
haven't
put Azeroth to sleep, basically. Or, I don't know.
maybe, yeah, and I mean that could even have like another fractal on top of that, where like if you look back, like at the Greek mythos, when we look at the literal Primus in WoW and how he might be connected with someone like Norganon and to the domination and control magics and to potentially the subduing of Argus itself. And so when you
Hmm.
look at how Hermes was sent by Zeus to lull Argus into a sleep. In the case of Argus Panoptes, he's never like really fully truly asleep, where he's always kind of watching and observing. And in this way, Argus is like, I think that that's just a fascinating concept of like one was potentially subdued inside the planet while the other was essentially being resurrected so that it could, well, for all intents and purposes, more than likely not be used as a weapon to try to destroy the former, which is
I think
fucking
Argus probably would have just
insane.
preferred. He would have been preferred to just been left alone.
Yeah, yeah,
Like just let me sleep and kind of like dream my demons and stuff. But they're like their life to him, and so are the old gods in that sense. They're life forms, and
yeah.
that is kind of an interesting thing we could go into. Where like I hinted at this last week about the black blood of the old gods and the
And it's
engineer
so
stuff from
red.
Alien.
It's so red. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I had an additional thought about the comet stuff we thought about. Like, couldn't you make a comet out of blood, technically? And, like, Titans seem to like to use Titan blood already. So if you were to go try to seed worlds with Argus's blood using Sessionel, like, I'm just.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. When you look back to the Legion invasions, there's one specific world that I found particularly interesting in the Legion invasions, and that's the one that you go to. I think it's Aranok or Aranor or some shit where there's blood all over the place. And the Legion is
Right.
there siphoning the blood out, almost like they're trying to. I sometimes I got vibes that like the Legion was collecting something, that they were like scouring the cosmos trying to find fragments or pieces of something, and that could very well have been Argus. And I mean, and then we look back to the quotes right from the Titan Pantheon: "We have fallen. We must rebuild the final Titan." Do not forget, right? Like that right there implies whether it's Argus or Azeroth that their intention is to, at least conceptually, rebuild this Titan. And what that means exactly in terms of like, are they rebuilding it under their control? Are they putting it back together because it's broken? Is it Argus that they're talking about? And is he the final Titan? Death is final. Death is eternal. Death is my realm. Look upon me and you see death incarnate, the unmaker of worlds, in the words of Deathwing. Or is it the last Titan? Protect, I guess Aman'Thul's dialogue that was removed from the fight does say protect the final Titan. So there is that, but it's always made me wonder, like, what does that actually mean? And when your idea here of whether they're subdued or unconscious and being rebuilt or awakened or whatever that might be, I feel like fits rather well into that concept. And I just think that the thing about it, and I love that you're like getting into the speculation on this note, is that you're looking at the standard perspective, what is obvious and what the standard trope they would want you to believe. It's like,
Mhm.
obviously Sargeras is supposed to be seen as the bad guy. Obviously the Titans are supposed to be seen as
He's
the good guy.
tragic bad
Right,
guy.
right. However, yeah, you and I would say that. But I love that because what I believe Chris Metzen has done, like you were saying, is he's taken some of these classic tropes and classic things that he's even potentially had a hand in and inverted them, right? And that's why I say things
Mhm.
like, what were to happen if you were to take Tolkien's lore and make not Eru Iluvatar, but I guess even Eru Iluvatar. What if you were to make Eru bad, or if you were to make what's the other one? The
Morgoth, or
yeah,
his Melkor, his son, or
Melkor for Sargeras or Morgoth, but I was thinking of Manwë for like Aman'Thul. Like, what if you were
oh,
to
I see.
what if you were to take those characters and like invert their positions? And so I love that you're doing this because that's exactly what the whole concept with Argus was. We get to the seat, we're told a thing, we see it happen, but there's so many details that are put in that cinematic that are left just unspoken, just never touched on, like this form of Argus that's showing on the screen, which is exactly effectively what he looked like when he first stood up after being, told to stand up, evidently by Sargeras. So anyway, I just wanted to say that I fucking love that you're looking at it that way, because people are often so resistant to the subversion of expectations. And Pyro, it's so obvious that Sargeras is the bad guy. And I've always said, and I always will say, you know what? If that's what it turns out in the end, I'll accept that. I think it'll be tremendously boring and lame, but I will accept that. And it is what it is. But I think it's way more compelling to look at it like you are and, invert those expectations, because just a tiny bit of context completely changes the view of what's going on. Like, how there are still people somehow defending the Titans after seeing what happens at the end of the max level campaign is fucking mind-blowing. Like, that's staggering. So anyway,
even Speaker Bryn is her name. Yeah, she even says like, "Oh gosh, was it Moira who reflects on the fact that like she was shocked that the Titans wouldn't allow for Earthen to have free will." She was like, "That's insane. Like, what would she think of us?"
Yeah, and that's because the dwarves, by and large, think that they were an intentional creation by the time they revere the Titans.
Right.
They see them as that good, and Magni's been having to grapple with that too, and that's why I'm hoping that they reveal that it really wasn't necessarily Azeroth who kind of had him imprisoned, so to speak, and that our interpretation of the Titans' actions has been pretty heavily skewed.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about like the Tolkien lore could actually play into that, because they have stages of creation where different beings like take over.
Yes, different ages.
Yeah,
I love that. Creation happens over and over. In the Norse mythology is the exact same way. Creation is a continuous thing.
Relevant, yeah. So with the different cosmic forces and the way we perceive them to be balanced based on, like, if you read what Xaxxas, the Titans have since come in and replaced, if you know what I mean, like using the Xeraths. And in a weird way, like what we're seeing is that the literal demonization of the Twisting Nether, where even like, because they have maybe a mastery over it, and they just told us that they don't.
It's a realm of pure magic. I would be fucking shocked if the beings who, are alleged to govern the physical universe and that stuff, like, they say that Sargeras is the only one. Well, they don't say that he was the only one. They say Sargeras started to study the Twisting Nether in Chronicle. And by studying its properties and where demons came from, that's how he learned how to, destroy.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was how to craft Mardoom, but also how to permanently destroy demon spirits. Or maybe that came after. I can't remember. The whole point, though, is that like they kind of make it seem like it was an uncharted realm. Oh, we've never been there. The same way that they say in Chronicle, "Oh, how could the Titans know?" Excuse me, I'm like having a hard time. I'm like hiccuping. They had no firsthand knowledge of the void or demons. And it's like, okay, like that's clearly not true. We have demons who claim that they were enslaved by the Titans. Like, so the Titans have very much, I agree. They've obscured their involvement in the Twisting Nether. They've heavily obscured what the Twisting Nether is. And some might say that the Twisting Nether could even be, as just a different interpretation here, the kind of a garbage can of the cosmos. Where
I was about to say, they banish things there because it's a good prison that they know how to use, perhaps. Like and that's what they're literally demonizing, is they're putting demons. They're like, "No, get out of the Great Dark Beyond. We're trying to save this realm from you." But it's like, that's wrong. You can't take the chaos out of the chaos realm. That is, by inverted history, it's actually where we live, the Great Dark Beyond, where the world of Warcraft takes place, is where is the realm of chaos.
Yeah, and that's yeah, I mean, you could turn it like that too, and yeah, I see what you're saying. Where you're like you're saying that the Twisting Nether is actually more the realm of order, then
astral. Yeah, no, really, it's soul, order, and light. If we take Xaxxas' word and try to attribute them to either one, I found that it was fitting better to think about like Argus is linked to life and maybe originally he's linked to death now, but that could have been one of the inversions that Sargeras took. But what did the Titans do first to him? It's probably relevant to talk about, because I totally agree with you that Illyria's memories Yeah, and Illyria's memories make it sound like it could be either the Titans first and then Sargeras. You know what I mean? Like that he's bound and betrayed by the Pantheon.
Yeah, and then it's I love how there's some things that are more ambiguous than others, but that dialogue to me is especially interesting because some of the phrases that it uses, like their fallen souls,
Yeah.
directly align with things like what Aman'Thul has said, right? We have fallen. We must rebuild the final Titan. Like, don't forget that kind of stuff. And so, and it also it's no accident that in the audio drama when they say it that Argus sends his memories in a single uncontrolled burst. That's
Yeah,
that's
you said
like
recently, what if they're out
yeah.
of order? That was a good point.
Exactly. Yeah. What exactly? That's fodder for like we don't even actually know. This could these events could be out of order. They could have huge gaps of time between them. We don't actually know. But yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the twisting nether being a realm of order is definitely a harder one for me to get behind, and perhaps it's because our mortal perception of it is so skewed. But it is kind of referred to as like obviously astral, ephemeral, kind of ever shifting, and that the perception of the twisting nether has a lot to do with the conscious observer. Um, they say that all of the primordial forces, the 6 identifiable ones, are kind of intermingling there. And kind of what I used to think was that maybe if Argus was chaos and like did the unmaking and all that stuff, maybe the twisting nether is kind of that chaos soup of like this is the remnant of all that's been unmade, and it's basically like untapped magical potential and like is waiting around to be reformed and remade into something new, and flows between all the realms as like a magical power source for all of them, and that something has to maybe take and give shape to that or give form to that. And I thought, well, maybe it's Azeroth, but maybe that's what the Titans are supposed to do, is like take that unshapen chaos and make order from chaos, not separate the chaos out of the order, Like
Yeah.
be more of an artist than a warden,
And dividing them. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
Be
I
yeah.
definitely understood that would be the biggest, hardest thing. Like if I was to start trying to build a video about this is why I thought, oh my gosh, I need Pyro's opinion on this
I
before I go
appreciate that.
forward.
That's so
No,
nice
because
of you to say.
genuinely, I had this vision of just like pre-Titan influence Argus who looks more like Cenarius. I'm like, fuck, that's cool. Like a Velen or
Dude.
who or like
Oh,
Malfurion. I'm like,
something I want so
on fire.
badly, dude. I want the life and death connection. I want that like Drust Wiccan magic, but also it's tied to Druidism, and you know what I mean. Like Drust
Yeah.
is much more domination coded, unfortunately, which sucks. But it's that dark Druidism mixed with like, dude, with like a scythe made of like briar and fucking. Have you seen like some of the appearances of the Scythe of Elune? Like one of the Scythe of
Yes.
Elune is like literally a fucking like black and red nightmare scythe that like it's like, dude, Argus could wield
Hmm.
that for sure. Like, that'd be so cool. That'd be so fucking sick. That's something that's a trope that I love more than anything. And that's why I love the Sargeras Anshe thing so much, is because it's that concept of like true forms. Like Sargeras to us looks like a demon, but with different perspective, maybe that's not what he is, or maybe at one time he was something different. Same with
Yeah, then maybe he
Argus.
looks like a wild god.
Exactly.
Big-
Same with Argus. Same with like Elune,
yeah.
Eonar. The like I even like Aman'Thul and Norganon, like the concept that at one point they did not have these orderly forms that exist as like these little astral fucking little world spirits or what I'm gonna call them world spirits because they don't seem like on the same par as a world soul. And it's
Hmm.
just like it's like
Like
what
prime elementals. Are elemental lords prime elementals, or is
dude
there something like
that
that in the universe?
dude, this is what I want that so badly. Like I want them all to be from a different source badly. Like I want Kaz and Golg to be like separate elemental lords, like that were conscripted into the pantheon, or like in that they all share this form now because they all ordered themselves together, or they use Zereth Ordis to reshape themselves or something. Like I want that so badly because the homogenized view that the Titans are all kind of the same thing, I kind of hate that. Like I want them to be in almost like a great cosmic council, like where each one was a representative of a different power, and they came together or were brought together as it were, and and are now working together, and perhaps through the combination of their powers they've formed other powers or discovered new powers, and what that could have led to. It's just like I just love that line of theory crafting so much.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, another thinking yeah, I agree actually. Like, it would be cool if they were like that idea of elemental more based creatures who found their way into a cult essentially
Yeah,
is pretty neat. Because if Amanthul were to like wake up, let's say he is the first, if what would he worship? Probably the sun and the moon orbiting him, or
I
like
could
what
see
would
that.
if you're a priest, or just in a weird way you have to think like where did he start off?
I,
How did he like the Arakoa to the Apexes? They eventually got to the true light and void by worshiping the sun first, and
and
so
and how and I also wonder, is there something that we were never told about? You know how like when he gives Nosdormu Nosdormu gets his power, he foresees his death and like it makes him maddened and all that stuff. That's never mentioned about Amanthul, so I've always wondered if there was an unmentioned, unspoken event where Amanthul foresaw something, or maybe upon his awakening saw his own end or something like that, and like that led to some of the events that have happened now, because they leave it kind of like, oh, he woke up and he just knew in his heart that others of his kind existed. It's like, okay, dude, like what? The fuck does that mean? He just knew in his heart? Is this like some Velen vision shit where he saw it, or is he just?
he
Uh,
was having dreams while he was, yeah,
yeah. And another thing
going
to
to sleep.
tie to the nature Argus Druid thing. Dude, I think I really think that the lesson of the Dark Titan and those things, I really think that you're right about those and how they connect. And I think it could be also why Fel is green.
I
But
agree, yeah, that's what I'm thinking now. It's like
and
chaos and life are, as Odin said, they really are the same. And that picture of A&R
yep,
casting the life flame, yeah,
yep.
it's like,
And
yeah,
it's like when Argus gives his memories to Illyria, why did that happen? Why did that occur? According to the whispers, it's because she's free or whatever. But what it seemed implied was that it's because she's connected to the void and perhaps also even the light. And through her acceptance and connection of those forces, Argus is able to transmit its memories to her. Memory being a very first one's coded kind of thing, by the way, just first of all.
mhm,
And then also that it makes me think like, okay, well, what did Illyria by this point, Illyria hadn't absorbed the heart of Lura or any of that stuff yet. So she's not like full Naru, like corrupted at that point yet. But it just made me think like Oracle Caesura, as according to Alfarim, speaks in like both one truth and a thousand simultaneously, like light and void together. And
right.
it like speaks almost into your mind. It sings to you like a Naru. And I thought that was just really fascinating because it almost made me think like, are the Naru or the language which they speak connected to Argus? Like, is that why Illyria again, Illyria hadn't
Mm.
got into the Naru stuff yet, but the languages of the light and void, the concept of them and the connections to them, I just kind of wonder, I guess, is the light and the void tied to her ability to understand him? And if that ties into like first one's memory magic or higher languages or I just think that kind of just maybe gives some suggestion that Argus is related to some of that first one's stuff, and for Argus to be, growth or um unrestricted life, and maybe even for Azeroth to be, the opposite of that, decay itself and consumption. I mean, fuck, I can get behind that. I've even got one of the I'm rambling, but one of my earlier interpretations of Azeroth was based, of course, on the Lovecraftian entity Azathoth and the
Mhm.
primordial chaos mythoses and all those things, and like dreaming blind idiot god, wake up and the universe is gone and that kind of stuff. And so I'm not opposed to the idea that Azeroth is, in fact, a grave threat to basically existence itself, at least in how she's been manipulated or attempted to have been manipulated by, the Titans at
Good
this
point.
point.
So I was trying to reconcile that too. Like, does it make sense to turn Azeroth into the villain? Not necessarily. And maybe Argus and Azeroth are in a way, perhaps both wiser than their children. So all of the demons and the wild gods and even the old gods, technically in this case, you could almost pin the Void Lords as being like Argus because he's representing Shadow in the Great Dark Beyond in this scenario. Um,
Yeah, you
they,
sure
it,
could.
they, so maybe like they don't really have the same amount of they can't impart their true will or wisdom onto their children, so that's why the Titans are also trying to now
Yep.
shape Azeroth into something probably that she doesn't even want to
Yep.
be, a little bit too extreme.
Yep.
You know,
And
everything you
Farim
just
goes
said
into
about
that.
imposing order. Yeah.
Yep.
And because there is a bit of a caveat, I had to think about. Wait a minute, so we just saw Magni's blessing, and that it gave like, or Azeroth's blessing through Magni supposedly, gave the Earthen a sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
But then I was realizing, no, that they gave them a soul, which is related to Mortis, and that was almost the kicker for me to be like, that's not even a plot hole. It actually it reaffirms to me that Azeroth seems to be like light, order, and soul, and Mortis. You know what I mean? Like what we
Yep.
can consider death isn't even necessarily decay. And I was going to make a point here about the Fel and how it could relate to like the parallel nature of what Agromar saw with the spore mounds and just life as it untames. As if life is unchecked, it seems to devour it itself. And
Absolutely.
Fel is an energy that is it. As Gul'dan says, the fuel for my magic is life. So it is kind of a death magic, and it's also called that in the Warcraft movie. Not totally canon, but pretty relevant to the mainstream understanding
Oh, and
of
Chris
how we're
Metzen
supposed to think
himself has
about
said that
Fel.
on stage too. He's called it an entropic death magic.
Right. Oh, so that's interesting. Yeah, entropic would be almost like it's just the inversion of life after enough time, because it's like it's too much, and that's I don't know. So the spore mounds, like when Agromar basically, funny enough thing, like he sees the future of Draenor that happens either way, and he actually takes part in creating it in some sense, because he has this vision that Draenor will become a lifeless husk if he doesn't do anything about it, and then wouldn't you know, like he creates the orcs by proxy. They turn it into a lifeless husk using green fell magic. So go figure.
Yeah, it's in a way like fate kind of like found its way regardless of which way it happened. And I
Hmm.
also, yeah, Draenor is such a fascinating thing to me, dude. Like the whole it could not have just been Agromar there. There's no there's no way. There's too much evidence of other magics present there, unless Agromar has like a better understanding of magics than I think he does. The Titan artifacts in Highmaul, I mean, one of them is literally fell in like shadow magic imbued in it, and they're alleged to have like fallen off of Gron. So it's like,
Oh,
fuck.
interesting.
It's like there's like 4 or 5 of them, and they all have different combo magics, and it really makes it look like it wasn't just Agromar. And then you find, Agromar drops spore mound seedlings when you kill him in Antorus, and you're like,
That's
okay,
right.
did this motherfucker who planted them then? Like who put them there? Because it said, oh, Agromar was led there by the Song of Life, and he found it, right? But it's like, okay, but if we find seeds though, and then he's caught later with those seeds, I don't know. I don't know.
Thought of an interesting thing recently about that, where I was seeing somebody compared like my newer video about the thorns in Eluna here. They basically had the idea off of it, so I credit them, whoever it was on MMO Champion, that it was like an actual rose cutting was planted in Azeroth, like a giant, and so that it gave me this idea, like, has Agromar ever tried to win the love of Aenar for any reason? And would he like take a cutting from Draenor? Because that stuff looks really similar to what we're seeing in Draenor, the Everbloom. Like, could he ever give Aenar a rose for any
Could
reason?
have, and it doesn't
It's
even
just
have to be romantic. I mean, it could just be, they all vowed to protect life, and he is a Vanir Titan. They want us to believe that Eonar is a Vanir Titan as well.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't surprise me if it was like, the Vanir, the bronze skin Titans were doing they had different methods, or maybe he discovered it there and was like, wow, Eonar might want to see this, or maybe he had a question about it and was like, hey, have you ever seen one of these? What is this? I mean, we do find a Genesaur on Elunaria with Eonar, which
Mhm.
highly suggests that she obviously knows about them and is potentially involved with them. And then now we see one at least, down under the surface of Azeroth here too. So it's like, that's just really got me wondering of like, did the spore mounds simply just appear there, or did someone plant them there? Did they come out of the Emerald Dream via Farallon? How did they get there? Because yeah, it just doesn't seem, it's always just seemed a little bit weird. But to go back to your point of what you were saying about parceling out those gifts, the first ones, and maybe how kind of they're not able to impart their full-blown will to these other beings. And I think that what Farim says in Exile Part 6, he says, "Long have I scoffed at what I learned of Titans or the Void Lords or demons of the Nether. I held Death's pantheon in higher regard, but now I know that they're just as limited. Truth lies not in one direction or another, but at their intersection. The first ones had parceled out all their gifts, but gave no child all of them. No wonder these offspring bickered with such incessant jealousy. Their very nature was one of denial." And so, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and in this way, I think it ties into what Chris Metzen has said about it before, is that eternal beings don't have free will. And so in this way, they're all kind of following a design, even if they don't realize it. And that design could actually be structured by the first ones to not endure and essentially collapse in on itself so that it can be reborn again. And the collapsing of it in on itself could very well be the unification of those two tri-forces like you've identified, which more than likely are represented through Azeroth and Argus. That's why I believe when Farim is saying, did they desire both were, but only one could be? Did they desire union? The song seemed to suggest otherwise. Both were, but only one could be. So in this way, I kind of think it as of like the creator deity, this hermaphroditic deity, which might be known as Elune, that is a combination of Azeroth and Argus, is basically the ultimate deity. And when it shatters and fragments itself, it creates reality. It creates this framework upon which all of these shattered and opposing forces grow. And through that growth, we have war and strife, but we also have myriad possibilities and all these different things that arise from it. And then inevitably, kind of like, the Ragnarok story, the universe kind of starts to collapse back inward on itself, and these maddened, potentially kind of eternal charges of these entities kind of forces this massive conflict that brings everything back together. And it's so fascinating to me because we look at it and we're like, are the Titans doing this? Is this their intention? Is that their intention? And sometimes I wonder if any of that really even matters. What does it matter? They still do what they do either way. And why are they doing it? I think one of the interpretations to that, of course, is that they're not the ones controlling it. That the actual pattern to which they're all adhering is drawn by Azeroth and Argus, and the Titans and the other eternal beings don't actually have any control. Which is why they leverage the mortals to accomplish their goals, because we're the ones that can bend the cycle and change things.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I know that was super
yeah, but the
ranty.
Elune thing. No, it's okay. It's about what you said about Elune dividing herself into Azeroth and Argus. I think kind of fits some of the inclination I had about the Eyes of the Earth Mother story, actually kind of being a cryptic telling of the two realms, right? Because we don't get an account really of how those came to be, except for in Chronicle. And it's if that's going to be like just our one Titan favorable.
You mean like the Shadowlands in reality, or the Twisting Nether?
The Twisting Nether and
Right.
Dark Beyond.
Yeah, it's left very like, oh, it was the cosmic explosion and powers at work, and it's very much like no one did any shaping or separating or ordering. Like, no, it's very weird that they kind of describe it. Yes, like what you're saying of like they don't really define the source or how it got to the way that it is. I don't know.
Just saw a question in your chat I do actually want to bring up. It's a good point about the matrix of leadership from Transformers, which is basically like a gift, like an icon of Primus's will, and his Primus is like a good guy in the Transformers universe. So that's the traditional Azeroth point of view. That if she awakes to her own will, she'll probably be a relatively good person. But if the Titans wake her up, she'll be pretty maybe hardcore. So
yep, that's what I believe.
I'm thinking the matrix of leadership maybe even was in Sargeras's hands at one point.
Yes,
yes. He was
overthrown
Optimus
Sun
Prime
God theory,
or
dude.
Megatron,
that would be so sick. Please.
And he lost the right to it when he cleaved the world.
Yes,
sorry.
And that could have been
in a weird way.
That could have been Gorshalok, who maybe the right to wield the greatest weapon in the universe is defined by that concept.
Interesting. Oh, that's a fun one. Put the Matrix in a weapon, because that's
Or
so, yeah,
yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
back in Azeroth now, because I was gonna say too
Yes.
another thing about the idea of like when we talked about the elemental lords perhaps, or like giant prime elementals perhaps being the Titans and stuff as one origin. I
Yeah.
wanted to reference back that like if you do go see this new Transformers movie, I don't know if Chris Metzen. I was looking for his name credited, like because I was like, what the fuck did I just watch? But at the
It's
center of
like that.
Cybertron is like the soul of Azeroth, but blue, and it's like
Oh
solar
jeez.
flares and all of that. And so I thought, well, what if that is where the energy spinning out into the cosmos maybe gets from for most of the Titans?
Yeah.
And maybe that isn't one of Argus's memories, but even if it is, it could be pretty fractal that when we think about the idea of world souls, maybe Azeroth is the one who spat them out as just little like solar flares essentially, and they eventually turn into the from the astral dimension that she represents, which is actually the twisting nether, the ether, and they've come to save the horrible, wretched realm of decay, basically.
Yeah, and in doing so, I even love like further plots there where like they've worked with the power or remade the power of death itself so that they themselves don't have to bend the knee to like the force of decay while in this realm, and like they basically take themselves and put like I don't know, dude. I love the idea that like they've basically used like an order-based necromancy like to keep themselves sustained this whole time, and that
Oh,
they're
interesting.
all like undead in a way. They're not living, right? But they're not.
Well, that's what happened to the elves and the Jedi, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they start drinking arcane stuff and become immortal after all. It's like, is that unliving to some degree? Like you stopped aging.
Norganon being the only one who I don't know, dude. I just imagine in my head like they all fell to Sargeras, which was probably intentional, and then they used like Ray's ally to like like Norganon is a fucking like a super powerful necromancer, dude. Like that'd be so cool. Like that'd be cool. Like I don't know. Anyway, there's so many different interesting little theories you can make out of that. But yeah. Uh yeah. I think
Yeah, I just appreciate you having me on to like hash this out more. I'm glad you seem excited about it because I was like, this is either going to go like really badly, trying to say that Argus is not destruction,
no, no.
and literally flipping the poles. But I'm thinking more about the fact that you mentioned Illyria and her connection to him. If she is like a mortal, it could be part of the reason why she's coming up as being more important to the whole World Soul saga. Like this World Soul saga might not just be about the one Prime World Soul. If there's two dimensions in this Warcraft universe, like distinct realms that existed before anything else, I assume that maybe they both have a prime world soul because the yin yang of this. Like I am forcing the Transformers lore on a little bit, but some of the comparisons with like Sargeras are undeniable. Especially if you hear his voice, the way he talks to Megatron, he says things like "Perhaps I misjudged you," and just
No
all this.
way. Which
Oh,
is like
100%. It's
literally
the
what he
same
says to kill
voice.
Jaden.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's perhaps like yeah, doubted your resolve. It's pretty crazy.
That's pretty
So
sick.
to try to think about the idea like, oh, Unicron's not just pardon me, Argus is not just inspired by Galactus, but this other creator or perhaps destroyer. In this, like you said, the inversion though, like in our world of Warcraft, the quote unquote Autobots are like the Titans, but they're kind of the bad guys. They're not even necessarily uh, they're they, hmm, they're not the heroes, that's for sure.
Oh
At the
no.
end of the day,
They
yeah.
might want to be, but that's wanting to be the heroes, not enough to be the hero.
And so if we attribute life, though, like everyone thinks the druids are heroes. Everybody tends to think they're pretty okay. So if you take credit for that in the form of ANR, and then suddenly, and I saw
Now you're
somebody
a
in your
good one.
Discord, yeah,
It's really
somebody,
easy. You just paint yourself as a good guy and then you're a good guy.
yeah. There is this line, this old god quote. I think it's like, there is a terrible lie at the beginning of all things.
Yep.
And
I know the
somebody in
one.
your Discord earlier kind of said that they think that that is light and life, and that life is light. It could very well be that life comes from Argus, who is shadow and chaos. Like it's those three forces are all fundamental together, and that's the lie. Is that the life, it can be protected and shaped by the light, but it's not its origin. Perhaps there's a little bit of like mental gymnastics we might have to do about even some of the stuff I've been trying to say about stars. Like I'll have to rethink a lot of this, but I'm glad you sat down to like have me
Yeah.
help me out with it. Yeah.
No, it's my pleasure, man. This is this is what I do. And yeah, that's the thing that you just quoted. There's a great and terrible truth at the beginning of all things. I am its herald, listen to my sermon, and know your infinite inconsequence. And it comes from a mode of cosmic truth, and it says here, we stand on the brink, you and I, the final act looms over us, casting a terrible shadow. Deep we plumbed, seeking knowledge of the world. Deeper still we delved until our fate was inevitable. Minds were shattered. My comrades ran screaming into the night, which ties very nicely into some other old god quotes from like the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. We are
Hmm.
all lost to that terrible thing. Now the malformed syzygy beckons. Complete the ritual and bring about the end. And malformed syzygy is something that keeps getting brought up a lot in my Discord, and it's
See,
some kind of like celestial conjunction, some like
it's like when one is
eclipse.
wrong in a sense. I think if I recall, it's a type of a regular syzygy would mean like it's just I think it's a type of yeah, a type of conjunction, but the malformed make it sounds like it's not supposed to happen, which is
Yeah, and it's
interesting. So
bad.
probably
Yeah.
include I think like the black sun perhaps, and
Oh,
like
dude,
when
I
that
can't.
happens and
I can't
uh,
wait, dude. We have so many celestial bodies orbiting us, and people just have no fucking idea. I can't wait till they tear the walls down, hopefully, and we get to see them because yeah, it'll be nice. But yeah, it's fun and hopefully my ideas or insight helped give some further clarity or inspire you to some other ideas. And if you want to chat about it again, let me know because I have I have tons of ideas about Argus and I'm open to all the different structures of how it could happen, even the ones where Sargeras is the bad guy. So yeah.
well like Anakin Skywalker seemed like a hero until he started killing kids, so that's
Yep.
always how I've just thought
And
about
we
it. Like he's
yeah
really is a bit of a Darth Vader
we
of this
always
franchise.
always knew that Darth Sidious was a pretty bad influence,
Well,
like
yeah. And
if
that's like, yeah, I'm on Thule in this case.
yeah, if it turns out that Sargeras's emotions or whatever have been heavily like turned against and manipulated against him, and like he's basically been like not even necessarily mind controlled, but like manipulated into it by falsified perspectives and lies, then I could still justify it. But yeah, otherwise it's gonna be a hard one.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There is like a certain amount of insanity. He has been called the Mad Titan, and so I've always kept it in mind. Like when we saw Argus, I kind of considered that like the linchpin in the argument that he was a little too far gone because he could have done anything with that world soul. But his, as the New Chronicle book says, his dark will was to raise Argus as an unmaker, and it just he at that point he doesn't want to protect life or even make it regrow. I don't think because if Argus was a titan of regeneration, that would have been exactly what he kind of would have wanted. Unless, the terrible truth is that life and shadow can't even be, they can't be separated in the way that the Titans would or think to impose their order to do so. And
And
so,
that may be the case, and like we've seen the shifting polarity between like light and void and life and death and how closely they can be related, right? Like when Drust magic bleeds into, other types of druidic magics. And so the very same thing could potentially apply to what you posit about Argus is like if he's the unmaker and if things like titans or powers are volatile in their ability to shift an aspect, then why not him too? Why not the ability to have been something different, whether it's nature and growth or dreaming and reaping or whatever that might be? Um, how, why not? Why not? Just because we see that he has shifted to this now, if people believe that Sargeras was once not corrupted and then he cleaved that Mardoom open and took all that fell energy and he became corrupted into a different form, why can't that happen to Argus? And frankly, that's exactly what they've told us has happened. Like,
yeah.
and so what was the original form? Well, if he was twisted into death, there's definitely one or two forces that are more directly linked to that, I would say. Life definitely being one of them, and light probably being another.
Mhm.
Shadow with death, I think, is inherent. But yeah, basically, I'm long-winded answer or explanation to say that like that polarity and shifting of powers is already a precedent that's been set, and that's really what started my thought initially of what about Argus the Maker, because Unmaker is such an interesting title. Like, what if we just
Yeah.
inverted that? So yeah, I fuck with it, dude. I fuck with it a lot. It's also, I think, Elune being, you know, something like a shadow entity or something more akin to a Void Lord is also like a fire idea. Like I can get behind that and all that stuff. And it doesn't have to
If
make them
she is just
evil.
a progeny of Argus, perhaps, like, if he did
Yeah,
decide, like, you know, the most
dude.
strong wild god type, like, the prime wild god, if you wanted to put
Oh,
it that way, might just be
Elune
the most
being
likely
like the
for her, if
daughter
not
or
being above them.
consort of Argus would be fucking insane. Like,
I'm entertaining those thoughts now because of this. I had this whole paradigm shift last night. Like I was like, oh no, what did I do to my brain? Like
dude.
now I am thinking about these realms in an opposite because Argus
And
does
think
fit
about all
there.
the
Like
weird fucking stories. Like Elune consorts with a great stag and makes Cenarius. Like what? Like what?
yeah, but Malorn is just more like a son of Argus as well, perhaps, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
and then you took the
There's that
antlers, right? And you're like, look
archetype.
at those. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I think I showed you that like a couple months ago, just the pet named Argy. Argy, of course, which is a little like blue Draenei goat thing, but
Yeah.
and we know why it's called that, but it to kind of compare the Talbuks more to the Draenei, and then think of like, well, like Cervids basically in to
Heavily
sum it up is what
connected.
they called them in Zereth Mortis. Like,
Yep.
oh, the Cervids loping around her
Yep.
and all
And
that.
there are
And
Cervids in almost every single Elune realm in the entire game.
yeah.
Even Shadow Moon Valley has Cervids covered in it. Yeah.
So then think about how this plays into Illidan too, because when I look at my wall, I got Illidan's on there in the Legion poster, and it's like that looks like a cool, almost like a life demon now to me in a sense. Like he's growing his
Yeah.
horns out from rampant life energy, and in a way, it puts the Cenarius situation where he's all like, you know, sacrifice is not something you've yet to learn. And this ties all the way back to the Primus story where he sacrifices his own life force to become all of Cybertron and the Transformers. Well, if that was more so a pride, if we kind of did the inversion thing and think of then Argus as the true kind of the more of the good guy in this case too, even though he is chaos, he is life. So that oh no, what just happened? I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
It happens to me all the time.
There's something along those lines though about the two of them. Pardon me.
No, that's
Gosh,
okay.
those-
While you were saying that, I was gonna just pull up some stuff that I felt like supported the concept of it. Like some of the things out of Zereth Mortis, again, they were directly like variations on Cervid. Yeah, I mean, it says right here, with grace and beauty, the Cervid lope across the land. Their elegant lines a delight to behold. Joy to the viewer, prey to the predator. This is the cycle eternal. A beginning.
Sacrifice. That's what it was. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I remembered. Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
like, Illidan is told by Cenarius that he has to learn sacrifice.
Yeah,
And if
how
Argus's
ironic.
biggest thing is that he sacrificed himself to imprison Azeroth, you know, like, that could be the big story here to some degree. And then, so then Illidan goes full circle and, like, learns how to get what would essentially maybe be Argus's power, not Sargeras's, you know, like.
That could be pretty interesting because, yeah, I mean, there's so many. I can't wait for Illidan to come back, dude. There's so many different ways they could take that, and another thing that goes in there, reflections on reality, a desire to tame the wild, make what is vicious playful. It can shift one to the other with enough time. The weave of reality flows in all directions, making any outcome possible. And reflections on choice. All of creation resides in the heart, a central point that flows outward into endless possibilities. All paths have been traveled, but never the same twice. Each choice is unique. The song ever changes into a new and beautiful tune with each step. And I'm not going to read them all, but I just think these things talking about different paths being traveled, never the same twice, each choice being unique, one shifting to the other with enough time. Any outcome is possible. Another one, variations on growth. This is a huge one. One of the most direct uses of the word creation in the game ever. Creation, growth, life. Everything bursts forth from the spark of idea. Death is an ending that they rebuild from. Anything broken can be fixed with proper care and culling. And I just think like care and culling, dude. I think about the primary goddess of harvest. What the fuck is her name in Final Fantasy? Naufika, FFX. God, I hope this is all safe for work. Jesus Christ, we could be going into a dangerous realm here. Scanning. Okay, it's and look at what she's a goddess with red hair and a big green dress, and look what she wields. a huge fucking scythe. And so I'm very much, I very much can get behind you in terms of the concept of like the scythe, the harvest, the
Right, and we're about to see the Haranir, who are these life
yes,
entities with these green eyes and
ah,
mysterious origins.
they're
And
so
you know what, dude?
sick.
I'm just gonna out it because I was thinking about like this. This is part of the reason I had to hash it out with you because I was like I was gonna make a video going into about the Haranir and how they almost seem to me like flat out like dreadlords who are life oriented. Like they found a way to live in that sense of things. Because the way she speaks is that we are supposed to stay quote unseen, staying
Uh-huh.
in our other forms, you know, and to be completely secretive. And I was thinking originally before I had this weird spiral thought about Argus and stuff. That maybe life is just considered an actual haven for a lot of the cosmic forces because unlike the others it's not oppressive, it does allow you to be completely unbound and growing. And so even if they did send
Until spores
infiltrators for
start
death,
mind controlling your mind. But yeah, besides those.
well, yeah, like a certain amount of order or maybe will is what's needed there,
Yes. Yeah.
you know, something like that. uh and so I thought, like, even if they are death oriented, they tried to send them into the life realms. Maybe the reason why it's not working is because they keep having like agents who just defect into life. They're
Well,
like, "Fuck this! I'm just gonna be a life demon instead." You know, this is.
to add to
But
that,
then now I'm thinking. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, I'm so sorry. You can please finish your thought, and then I have something to add there for you.
Yeah, just rounding off. Now I'm thinking about the Haranir as almost being a truth on where dreadlords might actually come from, and we've only ever seen kind of an evolution of them, but their primordial life chaos link is going to be revealed through the Haranir. So perhaps, like,
Oh, the
go ahead.
concept that they were like a life-based entity that were adopted by and maybe ordered into what they called Nathrazim,
Demons.
and yeah, and the interpretation was that they stemmed from the realm of death when that's not actually true.
Yeah,
That would
and
be
then, you know,
sick, dude. And I like that because you have this here from the enemy infiltration preface. The adherents to life are the most insidious of opponents. I love that the dreadlords are calling them insidious. That is so good. Perhaps because their nature is so antithetical to our own. And I always thought like, oh yeah, because they're death. Like that makes sense. But I like the concept of
alive.
like really tongue in cheek shit. Yes, that like they're not antithetical. They're insidious because they're really similar.
I
Still,
think there's a line by Mal'Ganis where he says, like, "You call us demons because that's what we want you to think." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm sure he just laid out the whole story, guys. I bet no, that's another layer of deception. Like he just told you, you think you know now.
yeah,
Be
dude.
happy with that, little guy. Pat on the head. You know we're from the realm of death, and that's what we want you to think again."
And the
Basically, is what he said.
in the report here is a report written by an unknown hand. The signature upon the final page has been rendered illegible. Illegible. So we also just found this on the floor in Revendreth while there are multitudes of dreadlords still working in Revendreth. I'm just going to put it out there. They wanted us to find this.
Yeah.
Not only did they want that, but to finish this quote, it says, "Still, we learned much from observing the link between the adherents of Life's Plane and Ardenweald, and we have confidence that our high confidence that a vulnerability has been identified. Our operative has already gained the trust of her target. It's Lady Moonberry. I'm saying it right now."
I agree. Yeah,
But
I played the same role. Illusions. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And then again to corroborate what Mal'Ganis, kind of suggested, and as previously discussed, our position within the plane of disorder is proceeding flawlessly. Consuming fel energy is not a pleasant process, but a necessary one. The deception you have architected will bear fruit in the ages to come. And I really I think that, yeah, I like the idea of what you're saying, and the fact that those Haranir unquestionably carry a bat motif is like,
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
Which could, like, vampires at that point. Like,
Yep.
and if you think about vampire bats, one of the main things that they like to eat is boars. Like they go and they latch
Really?
on to boars. It's pretty common. Like there's a common video of it, anyways, for sure. Like where they're
Huh.
leaping after a family of boars, like in a National Geographic, because it's just I don't know, a little bit
What the
relevant.
fuck?
But
No, that's very
where we
interesting
first where we
considering
first
the
even go
Quillmore
into
stuff.
Razorfen, yeah, Razorfen Krell has bat caves there of all things that they like
Yeah.
when you go
I
into
forgot you fight a
the
bat
downstairs.
boss.
Yeah, yeah.
You
It's
th-
pretty. You
Dude,
get
I
to loot
thought
their
that video
guano.
was so insanely good. That yeah,
No, thanks.
dude. I haven't watched the live stream that you had from the other day, but yeah, whenever that gets made into a video, I'm definitely gonna watch that because I definitely have not predicted everything. I've I knew that I knew that Il'gynoth was in a world tree or infected a world tree. I knew that there was a world tree in Ungoro. You know, that's about the extent to which it went.
Yeah.
You know, I'd really love to hear how you know, you tie Belladar to that, and like how, you know, I'm interested to hear all that.
I might not make a whole video on it, but I could sum it up here, and because it was more so just exploring the thought, and the thought
Sure.
was like, you know, I hinted at you in chat a couple like weeks ago about this, about like what if this old map of Ungro crater with these like lines extending from it could be indicative of that it's an impact crater.
Right.
And I
Right.
started thinking about the Beladar as something that clearly impacted the planet, and it has
Sure.
relative location pretty close. And I'm sure it burrowed underground to a point before it like reached the cavern it's in, or whatever happened there. And then you have these ancient crystals in Ungro crater, of course, power crystals, which resonate with frequencies, and they seem to bestow like intelligence to assuming they're the same kind of the ones in Sholazar.
Yeah.
If we went and looked at Sholazar Basin and one, like they're called the Skyreach pillars, the blue one, the
Yes.
Lifeblood pillars, the red one, the Glimmer Spark, or was it the something? Moss Light was the
That
green
is right.
one,
Yes.
and the Glimmering pillar was like this lavender, almost white color, and then the Sun Touched pillar, of course, was the yellow one. So I was thinking, like, gosh, that sounds like Belladar to some degree. And if you look at some of the concept art for the Journey to Ungoro Hearthstone expansion, or not even concept art, the official art for it, which we know Tortolon were canonized from, there's like kind of one of them is a meteor just straight up crashing. It's like, well, we never heard about a meteor crashing in Uncro crater before. And then there's this NPC called Lyra the Sun Shard, which is like a light crystal elemental, and nothing like it exists in the game, but it's pretty fascinating.
That is interesting. And there's also another Hearthstone art that I feel like might relate to that pretty nicely, because there's one of Freya standing in an area that has a volcano behind her and like palm trees. Like, it honestly looks a lot like this art, and it looks primordial as fuck.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
And
like
like
she
look at,
definitely was at Ungro. Yeah,
oh
it's
yeah, for sure. I mean, look at this fucking T-Rex here that's got green swirlies on it and green crystals growing out the back of it. Have you been to this is kind of like not that related, but have you looked at the Traders Post items this that have been around this month?
not a ton. They're mostly pirate themed. But what did you notice?
There's a fell glaive that says that it's forged in the Emerald Dream from the soul of 1,000 demons, and it's a fell glaive. And I was just thought,
Hmm.
that's kind of fucking weird. Like, wait a second. Who is forging from
Yeah.
demon souls blades in the Emerald Nightmare, or in the Emerald Dream is what it says, not the Emerald Nightmare, it says the Emerald Dream. So I was like, I don't know where the fucking thing is here in the city. I probably flew over it 4 times, but yeah, I was just wondering if you had seen that, because it kind of made me
No, but
think
that's really
about that.
interesting because it does make we've already kind of noticed, I think, connections between like the Emerald Nightmare and like, demons, of course, and
Yeah,
then so
Archimonde
if
carrying the
Argus,
seed.
yeah, if Argus was sort of like a life entity in that case, it's or like a chaos and life entity. I'm just thinking about what do you sorry, what comes to mind for you with Gahanir and the whole
Oh
existence of the Emerald
fuck.
Dream beforehand? Like, because in a way, that's like taking a branch from him is a lot like this idea I talked about earlier, taking the rib from Adam to create Eve. Like, is this how the old gods came to be? And there's a
It could
whole
be
bunch to
Argus
that.
might not be meant to be outside of like the Emerald Dream, or the Shadowland, which it depends on whichever interpretation you want to go with, right? Like, Azeroth could belong to the Dream as Argus belongs to the Shadowlands, or it could be the opposite. Argus belongs to the Dream as his dream suggests, or his memory suggests, and Azeroth maybe belongs more to the Shadowlands in this way,
Well,
and perhaps the
we,
designations of powers could align with that or something.
if you think about what the finale of Shadowlands revealed, the power source of it was
It
Azeroth, and
was
so
literally
her,
Azerite.
yeah,
Yeah.
her being like the soul and light and order actually fits what Zereth Mortis is doing.
Yeah, and the
It's like
fact that domination didn't work on her. It's like, domination might be order, light, and death as a magic, and fell might be light, chaos, and life as a magic. And those two might be higher magical manifestations, combo magics, if you will.
intersections, yeah.
Yep, that represent each other. So in this way, yeah, the fact that the Ouroboros gate and the Maw reacts to us, the fact that Azeroth clearly resists domination and all those things, it's like, wow, that's like her power is directly compatible with everything there. But remember that this is all of this is after the sword. And because that, the Azerite, as you know, as familiar with goblins as you are, when they first found it, it was just this golden liquid. It didn't crystallize, it didn't have the blue aspects in it. And so it's like, okay, would all of these mechanisms that we've encountered, the Chamber of Heart, N'Zoth's prison, the Shadowlands, would those things have reacted the way that they did if the sword hadn't been stabbed into the planet? The answer to that, in my opinion, is no. They wouldn't have. And so that shows me that Argus is a fundamental, potentially a fundamental aspect of the power's compatibility, and that he needs to be present for any of this stuff to actually work, which is what also feeds into the concept that he must be one of the first ones.
And it is rather like planned out, because something I've seen like barely mentioned, I guess, but it always strikes me, like I always thought about this with N'Zoth until we had him appear and kind of like, well, he's still an acting agent, but
Oh yeah, dude, I can't wait till he comes back.
the difference between like he used to be, we understood him as in control of the infinite dragonflight, and that always threw me for a loop because I'm like, doesn't that mean N'Zoth's already won? Like we're waiting for him to win at this point because he's control of time, guys, and the Titans are dead. So
I did not share in that interpretation personally.
Okay.
I always,
I was just an underestimation, or maybe I was not reading enough. But.
Well, I always questioned it. It's not that I disagree. It's that I'm unsure. I was always unsure of like, is this guy doing the N'Zoth thing? Because in the future that he weaves, like Deathwing is dead, he's impaled on the spire, and I think that if I'm remembering correctly, maybe that was like part of the plan. Deathwing was just a tool, and then he kills himself or something. But I always found that I was unsure about that. So I'm curious, like, do you think that what do you think about that now? Because I always interpreted Murazon was as an offshoot, obviously, of what happened with Nozdormu, and kind of an unavoidable side effect of the prophecy that he foresaw. And whether or not he could align himself with N'Zoth is obviously completely in question. But it seems like there were some people that interpreted like, oh, he's unquestionably serving N'Zoth, and I just wasn't sure if I fully understood that.
I think there was some hints that if you followed the logic of what they were trying to stop each time. So it was like in the dungeons where you would try to stop the orcs from invading, and then you would try to kill the Lich King early and stuff. There was a through line where I think maybe they were mostly trying to stop Thrall from becoming basically the heart of the aspects, or what did you call it, like the Earth Warder.
Yeah.
It kind of seemed like they were all like all of these, you go to escape from Durnhold, and you actually kind of like, because the bronze is doing the right thing, you help Thrall like live. But I think there was an assassination attempt there.
There was. Yep. That's exactly why they're there.
Yeah, so that's why I kind of assumed it was N'Zoth, because N'Zoth's the villain of Thrall in that expansion during Cataclysm, during the Hour of Twilight when all that's happening. So
one of the things that gets me is that he says you crawl blind, like what does he say? Blind, unwitting, like a writhing worm towards endless madness and despair. This, he says, I've seen the true end time. This is a blessing you simply cannot comprehend. And that's one of those lines that makes me think like, I can't.
Sorry. Go.
Oh well, no, you're okay. I've interrupted you several times. I can't. I have a hard time. Like, how can that be that he could be with on N'Zoth's side if N'Zoth is alleged to stand for madness and despair and all those things? If Murazon seems actively fighting against it.
Because I think maybe the outcome Aman'Thul had planned for him, and this goes to your larger point about like which one was the result of something already foreseen. Right. Is that maybe he did give in to the whispers because he was trying to, like what he just said, this is like a blessing you cannot comprehend, because what the Titans had planned for you is
like, way worse.
Yeah, and in this case, to bring up, like, I was the long form I was going to, but the first ones and this sort of idea of like the Titans, the thought I had about N'Zoth being in control actually applies still, I think, to the Titans after what we saw in Shadowlands. And the fact that you have a god of time who is not being attributed to the idea of these like prophecies and the set thing stone that we awaken in the future. Like, I know I've heard Steve Denuser answer in the interview that it wasn't like a set in stone prophecy, but these things were just left there for us to find at the right time. So it's that we're talking about in a way that is faith. And that is even more in line with what Aman'Thul would do if he was going to be
Yes.
shaping time and using the light or the void
And
with
as a
our
priest, he's a fucking
orator. Yeah,
priest in Hearthstone.
exactly.
And
Oracle
fucking
priest, probably, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
who knows?
absolutely. And fucking and what it and I really felt that the Bronze Dragonflight quest lines in Dragonflight were really trying to show some of the philosophy there, where Nosdormu shows Eternus, like, look, this is why, this is the deeper lesson here. You have to understand that, yes, this hurts, this is painful, and it's terrible that your sister isn't around anymore, but you must realize that if she hadn't done what she did, Chromie doesn't live and you're not here. So I
Mhm.
really found that there was like some deep wisdom in there of like accepting the past, accepting the darknesses that have befallen things, and learning how sometimes they're necessary. And that to me just screams like, if Aman'Thul is capable of that thought, he's a good guy. Like there's no, I don't like, oh god, I would so much prefer that he has that
That's a good
wisdom.
point. It's a
I,
good point. Because if he's combining the light and void, maybe like Illyria, where she experienced that was that the truth was happening in
yep.
the present in a sense,
And
then
yes,
maybe this
yes.
character is more like Norgannon.
Yes.
Because if you look at that Pantheon art, he is shrouded in a purple starlight, and it's like, well, he's the guy who would have books that read all the way into the future. I think
Yeah.
like that's the kind of thing. If you look at what
God of
Algalon says,
Fates.
all possible outcomes have been foreseen,
Yep.
and that to me seems to like he's
He
done enough of
specializes in
strange things.
foresight.
Yeah, gosh, wouldn't it be kind of funny if the Eye of Aman'Thul is not even his pillar? I mean, it's actually an Organon thing. Could be. They have the discs of Organon already, but I'm just thinking about, or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean
there's
the
gifts,
purple
like
arcane eye would be very interesting, and arcane itself is such a fascinating concept. Kind of what you kind of touched on something there that I've always, not always, but I've kind of grown to be like, well, that's kind of weird. Why doesn't Aman'Thul visibly and outwardly use light and void? Like the only instance of him doing that is the staff that we see, and we presume that it's light and void based on its appearance or orator.
mhm.
But like, why doesn't he? Like, why does he use arcane? Yeah, it's always been like a very weird thing to me. It kind of seems like I agree with you that like maybe even to an extent, like you'd want to be using light and void, and maybe the combination of both, so that you could see like what Illyria did. She could see the truth, and why wouldn't you? And that's kind of what makes me. That's like when we start getting into Xalatath and the Naru and light being broken and
Mhm.
truth maybe not being a part of it anymore, and like all this stuff is just like it makes me so giddy for that, because dismantled faith concepts are so fucking good. Like five pillars that are very robust and great things to strive for, but missing one fundamental aspect of it dismantles the entirety, all of the integrity of the whole system. Like,
Yeah,
oh, I love that.
and it's like what Chen Stormstout says: "What is worth fighting for?" Right. So if you don't have truth to orient you,
Yeah,
then you
you're
could be
fighting
fighting
for
for
nothing.
anything or nothing. Yeah,
Yeah,
anything or nothing.
yeah, anything or nothing, a lie or a truth, or yeah, and that's what's so fucked up, and that's kind of what I thought that like I'd like to tie those motifs and concepts into characters like Sargeras, where it's like that's what set him off, is like he and Zoval, they realized that they were serving ends of something that wasn't true. It wasn't
Mhm.
fucking real. It didn't have any actual value, and they panicked because they basically came to this conclusion that life had like had, or reality and existence itself had lost its meaning because it's not true anymore. So anyway, yeah, God, dude, I could talk about this for hours, dude.
Yeah, no, it's fun. There's so many, and that's why I was losing my mind. Like sometimes just like trying to write it all down, think about it,
Oh,
and
it's so
there's all these
much.
kind of like sometimes it feels like caveats, but if you talk them through enough, you might find like the shared knowledge where it's like, oh no, that's actually more of a plus to the theory, or the new angle of looking at things, because that is the fun of it. At the end of the day, like being wrong is definitely something I would embrace, and
Yeah, I mean,
in these
shit.
cases, but.
I listen back to some of my earliest theories. Some of them are definitely wrong, but it doesn't definitely doesn't change anything. It's just about, yeah, it's fun, and it's fun to look back and think like, oh man, like back then my view was like so narrow. Like, and even just a year ago or like 2 years ago for me, my view was so much more narrow. And honestly, dude, I really mean this. Like you and really like your videos have been tremendously impactful. Like,
Glad.
yeah, dude, it's really like for between like you and I think that you really like compile your ideas, you organize them so fucking well, better than have ever done, better than Akko does, like better than most people do, and like it just makes for some of the most entertaining fucking videos, and like I just it's definitely been inspiring for me because I've been doing this for so long that you get stuck in your biases sometimes. You want the character to be the hero, you want this, you want that, and like sometimes it's hard to get around that, and one of the things to do that is like hearing alternate ideas. And when you first posed the idea of Zal being like a Naru, I was like, that's fucking stupid. And then I thought about it more and I was like, dude, like this guy, that's genius. Like,
And you thought about it in a way more than I did. I kind of was like, oh, like it was an inclination I had, and then
but
when we
that's all
got
it takes.
that one video from Blizzard, I was like, you know what? That was
Yeah.
too much like a Naru. Let me just make this video quickly. Like, what if? And
Yeah.
so yeah, it spirals out, and
And
yeah,
then
the way
Matt
that's
hears it
happened.
and he says that idea and I say it on stream and then we start going at it and it's like, holy shit, dude, this is a sick idea.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool because then in a way that's what's happened with you here, kind of putting all these seeds in my mind, quite literally with
Seeds, lol.
Argus. Yeah, no. That's what I'm saying. It's like the seeds of regrowth or whatever from Argus, like these brainworms, if you will, of the old
Yeah.
gods. And so here I am trying to bring this more like, because I can't help it. What I try to do when I'm doing theorizing is like exhausting anything that
Yes.
seems too cool to me. And I'm like, okay, if this is a cool idea, let me find every way to prove it wrong as fast as possible because I don't want to like play in La La Land if
Yeah.
it's that like. And so there I am. Think this is why I got on the call with you, and I'm thinking in my head like if I want to make art of Argus the Maker, who's more of like looks like A&R in a sense, but is still more chaotic and
Yeah.
think of a chaotic version. We have actually seen it, the Emerald Nightmare version of
If you
Scenarios, I
look,
suppose.
you don't have to do anything, but if you do that, I would appreciate more than you could ever know if you would show the thing, my little Argus the Maker thing from back in the day of like, just because
Oh yeah.
I don't think that's what he's going to, I don't think that that's his true form necessarily. I think that what you're going for is going to be way cooler and probably more accurate, but just cause like, I think it supports your idea. Like just the concept of like, playing with the inversion of powers and stuff. Now, obviously, you don't have to do anything. You make you however you want to do. But
Oh no, this is like why I
yeah.
brought it to you, man, because I thought if anything, like the coolest thing for us to do would be to release like two videos at the same time that people have to watch both of them in a sense to get the full picture or
Well,
to
that's a
get
good
like
idea.
additional info.
Oh my
You know what I
god,
mean?
that's such a sick fractal too for the light and void. That's so sick.
Yeah, depending on who is which.
Yeah. Hey, you can be the light,
know.
I'll be the void. I don't care. I'll do whichever.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work from a place of doubt already. You know, it's a lot of like
Okay, you're void
questioning
then.
in my videos. If you know, yeah, maybe void.
He's
Who knows,
yeah,
but
yeah, that's a really good point. I'm a little more yeah, I'm probably a little more
nice way to say Pyro's really sure of himself.
yeah.
Brother to brother.
Yeah.
No, but everybody, I could use more of that in my life. So there you go. Like, it's inspiring to some degree.
I appreciate it. It's always back and forth for me. I'm like, I say it and I'm like, you got to be sure of yourself. And then I hear it back later. I'm like, God, you're so arrogant. You're so you're so cringe. Like, if I came to my stream, I wouldn't want to talk to me sometimes. But so yeah, yeah.
That's funny.
It's what it is though. I was apologizing the other day for getting passionate about something. Someone's like, "Oh, Pirate's okay, you know, we love your passion." I was like, "Yeah, but you can also be nicer while also be being passionate." Yeah. So yeah.
No, but you've also like seen the hard side of the internet a lot, and so like I can definitely speak to it. Where I'm quick to think people are out to get me, and I have to catch myself. So I totally get it.
It's hard, especially someone who's got ADHD and is always kind of trying to increase the level of performance and live up to the really non-existent self-set expectations that we put on ourselves. It's hard, and but yeah, I think at the end of the day, I had to just like start looking at what I do as art, and whether even if it's just my interpretation of a story, it's still art. It's still coming out of my head, and it's still based on connecting dots and themes and all those things. So yeah, I just tried to like appreciate what I do more, because I just don't think I think if you don't think what you do is cool, then it's easier to believe when people tell you that what you do sucks, that it's true, So got to believe in yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
it's hard sometimes.
I'm trying to find a little picture here. I think it's called Pantheon. When I made this It's funny because now I might invert the roles for astral and
And
physical.
by the way, have you played FF14?
No, I admit I'm
You
not
would
a
be
Final
shitting a
Fantasy fella.
fucking brick, dude. FF14 Shadowbringers expansion does literally exactly what you're talking about. Where,
Oh,
spoiler
yeah?
alert, chat, spoiler here. Are you ever going to play it? Probably not, or?
No, no.
Okay. So the cosmos in that game is in astral and umbral alignments. So there's 6 elements. Um, there's wind, earth, fire, water, ice, and levin, and then there's an astral or positive and umbral negative charge to each of them. So light and darkness are associated with astral and umbral. Historically, darkness was associated with umbral. Uh, what am I talking about? Eras where it's like after cataclysmic destruction and and ages of activity where cataclysm happens. Darkness was always associated with passivity and stasis and those things. However, what they end up exposing in Shadowbringers is that it's the opposite. That light is actually more
Mm.
associated with stasis, and that astral darkness is actually active. And so it flips the entire cosmology on its head, and it's done so fucking tastefully and corroborates everything else that they did. I don't know if WoW is going to attempt that, but conceptually, what we've discussed today, I feel is right in that same vein, where like much of what we understand about the cosmological structure could be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what forces like stasis and entropy we attribute
Mhm.
to other forces. And so
Yeah.
while
The
not the
cons of
same
both.
game, yeah, exactly. There's good, yes,
The
there's good and
question,
there's
yeah.
bad. Absolutely. And how is it wielded, right? And so you as the player character wield light and dark, of course, to like do the good thing, right? So yeah, I think that if since you're not going to play that, it's not a big deal, but conceptually it's right in that exact same vein, and it's been done in modern MMOs too, so it would not surprise me if they did that in WoW to some capacity with like
Mhm.
order and chaos and or
It does
life and
seem like
death.
it's already kind of maybe been implied and that we've been living the lie and the lie is
Yep.
about to be lifted. Because no, with
Yep.
everything they've coded, where Odin will just straight out say life is chaos, and at the same time you have Konzu revealing to us that stasis is most likely what's holding the dream, and you're like, wait a minute,
Yep.
like is
And
that
while it
because it's
protects it, it
chaos? You know?
imprisons it. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yep.
um, I wanted to send you this picture here again. This is from my Shadowlands video. It's kind of at the end page, and it's I think worth looking at because I based it on this Masonic artwork. If you look on the Discord here,
Mhm.
um, so one of the things about these two pillars, which I think of like if you pull up the original Titans art that they based that on, I think that is the inspiration for the two pillars behind them is Boaz and Jachin, which are reflective at the top globes of the terrestrial and the celestial realms each.
Ah, they represent
And
the two worlds mirrored. Wow, they
yes,
really do have two pillars behind them in the art, don't they? Holy shit.
this is yeah, I've been basically cooking up this theory that I call Metzin's Masonic Masterbots. And it
Oh my god, that's such a good name. What the
yeah,
fuck?
it's just alliteration my buddy and I always joke about. So it's in this case, the Zereth Mortis stuff seems very, and even if you look all over the Isle of Dorn, you'll see this what is the square and compass symbolism, and they're builders. They are masons. This is not even theorizing because if you go back to Blackrock Depths, there's a place called the Masonry where they're
Do you
carving out,
are you gonna tie this
stone.
into like Freemasons and shit?
Am I looking into it? Or sorry, what was the first part?
I said, are you gonna are have you looked into or are you intending to tie this to like Freemasonry and stuff like that at all or no?
Well, a little bit. I think a lot of the ideology of the Titans could be inspired somewhat from the Masonic point of view. I've
Okay.
read in about that myself, and I've looked into it a lot because it's fascinating. I'm personally like I used to be growing up, kind of like you know I don't know how to say like really I was just really impressionable as a kid, and so I
Sure.
didn't think that there was an importance to the idea of soul because everyone misjudges it. They're like, as if. But then of course like early 20s and there's some experiences and I'm like, wait a minute, like, what if? And what if I'm
Life
not at
could
the
be a
top
little
of that
more.
food change?
Yep.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
we could be in a prison, afterlife prisons and stuff. And then WoW did Shadowlands and I was blown the fuck away. I was like, what? This story is about what I'm stressing about in my life right now. And
Which
so
is,
just
I
grab
just wish they handled it better because man, we could have had such a treat. And Zareth Mortis is a phenomenal zone. Don't get me wrong, but I wish they would have done a little bit better.
yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, uh, And so, but I would flip this now to talk about the art. I'd actually put Argus, I guess, for the terrestrial realm. Whereas I was thinking about him originally as being like the twisty nether one. And I made this before we learned about Prime World Souls. So now that I have a little more, like, okay, so if there's one Prime World Soul, is it potentially that there's going to be two of for each of these forces of creation and destruction, essentially? And it's not going to be what we think. It's the Titans would like to think of, because Azeroth is their creator, they think of her as the force of creation, and Argus is chaos, destruction, and but really, we might learn that Azeroth is more like a destructor force to keep things in balance, and that she comes, like she might even be the one who has the scythe originally, and they've just tried to turn Argus into a version of Azeroth. Like that's sort of what I've been thinking too. Like if Sargeras got his hands on Azeroth's world soul, just like he did Argus's, what would she then have turned into? If we just if he won, if he steamrolled us, and if Argus is any reflection of that, maybe he was already trying to turn Argus more into what he wanted Azeroth for.
Yeah, maybe like
he was like,
prepping it.
yeah, love the one you have instead of if you can't have love the one if you can't have the one you want, love the one you're with, kind of a thing. So he's like, I can't have the prime world soul of my realm, the twisty nether, so I'm going to use the prime world soul of this wretched realm to just like try to create some inverted version of the destroyer.
And that's kind of how I feel about the Titans, to be honest. Is like that's kind of what I think. Yeah, and I get that. I get that we're I get that we're it's Sargeras who did it. That's what but. Like
No, I
that's
agree. I
yeah.
think at first, what did they do to him would be a good question. Like, I think
Yeah.
it's likely that the whoever ripped off his antlers was more likely the Pantheon as a whole, not just Sargeras. Like if he was when they ripped his head off, which they did, which is what makes me think even more likely they're trying to disguise what his true nature was.
Oh, because the literal top of his skull and his antlers or horns are literally gone. I
And
see.
Draenei have horns. Like their whole race has, even one of the ones you have is called, like the options is called Wild, and it looks like it's starting to branch into antlers on the male Draenei.
Yeah,
But
that's a good point.
I was gonna bring up the Sylvan from the Shadowlands. One of the compelling arguments I thought that I could feel, or that I would arrive upon when I was thinking about Shadowlands being related to Argus, as you say, would be the Sylvan and the Draenei seem pretty similar in Ardenweld, and even what Macquarie looks like. Like what was Argus like before? Looks like it had Aurora Borealis and Emerald Green and stuff, and in a way, their story could mirror what happened to the elves, where they just got too wrapped up in arcane magic and then became the Eridar. Like, the civilization totally fell away from its almost, like Pan, if you know what I mean, like fawn, like the fawn god in Greek stuff, I think.
Yeah, yeah. What about the two different worlds? Can I ask a question about that?
Hmm.
Do you think it's possible that they used to be one world that was split into two? That like
That would be like the Elune idea, I think, maybe that there were one being before the universe even existed, right? Like that they were.
yeah, oh, I guess it would be. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of it in like terms of like Aber Toril from Forgotten Realms
It's a
D&D.
good point. Yeah, I've read about that. Yeah, how they were like bridged afterwards, but they used to be one realm when they became two. They were
Yeah,
bridged, I think. Yeah,
AO
or they were
sundered it
two
into
and
two
became one.
worlds apparently, Aber and Toril, and then which meant the naming of Aber Toril meant Cradle of Life. And the art for it, Lord Ao is the overgod of the worlds of Aber Toril, and the realms see an embodiment of the balance, showing no aspects of any extremes. As overgod, all deities and primordials of Aber and Toril, even those who also operated in other spheres and planes such as Lolth and Tyr, were subject to him. To be more precise, only the aspects of gods directly connected with Aber Toril were under the power of the Hidden One, which is, I think, an epitaph for the same thing. Says, know ye that there is one God above all the gods of Faerun, and being known as Ao, the one who is hidden. Ao it was, so we are told, who created the gods, to bring order out of chaos, so that our world could exist, each beast in its place and each plant in its niche, all in harmony. Standard talk, I know, but evidently true.
Wow.
Yeah. it's
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
maybe we could think about this in terms of like if Azeroth and Argus is like the life and death and creation and destruction are a yin yang sort of thing. The origin of yin yang comes from like there's this giant like bestial god who splits a world egg in half. So there's probably some relevance there to the idea that you could have one being or one planet, one egg, sort of, just so to speak,
Yeah.
that is split into the two entities, and they become like the whole.
And if I had to guess how an entity came to be split like that, then the art that I have on stream, I feel is pretty suggestive of that type of instance happening.
Yeah, it is interesting, like
Especially
'cause then
considering
we
it's a
were
Mornblade.
yeah, yeah, for capturing, or maybe he is the one who isn't. Yeah, I do mess with that both ways. I do think Sargeras being dominated would be quite the twist on that. I
I al-
almost wonder if it would feel. It wouldn't be a twist. I know what you mean. Like it is written on the
I haven't
wall, but for the
prepared for
most
this
people,
level of
to
class,
sort
but
of
I'm happy to
would
be
it
here.
seem too
Will this be on
flipped
the
all of a
test?
sudden?
it
Because I'm
might.
going to disagree with the method, but I'm
It
thinking about reaction a lot.
It might, and I think that one of my introspective interpretations to it, and this is something I say for myself and for Sargeras Livichiros, that I haven't prepared for this level of class, but I'm happy to be here. This be on the test. It actually will be. Get your pencils ready. We have a pop quiz in 5 minutes. Make sure everything else is cleared off your desk. Phones are put away and turned off, please. There will be no cheating. Otherwise, you'll have to retake the test in a isolated environment. Livichiro, thanks for the 79-month resub. That's
Ooh,
fucking insane.
it's insane.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. But one of my interpretations to it, because I obviously relate myself so much to Sargeras as someone who really intends to do the good thing and often lets his fiery, passionate demeanor get the better of him and really make him out to be a fucking bad guy and an asshole. One of my interpretations is that Sargeras isn't actually dominated and that it is his emotions that are controlling him. That he is so afraid and he is so mad that he's blind to the point where he's not literally under the direct effects of a Mornblade, as it were, but he's under the shackles of his own emotions.
Yeah,
And
it's paranoia,
yes, and that
as it
it's
says in the book.
yes, and that it's much more about a symbolic domination rather than a direct one. And I almost
Yeah.
kind of think like
Ah,
it's almost more fucked up that way.
crushed his spirit, right?
Yes, crushed his spirit, manipulated him, made him fearful and angry, and the guy he went insane. He just broke. He's like the Joker in a way
Mhm.
of like he just broke. He just got to the
Especially if
point where he
like the
couldn't
Dreadlords
handle it.
sorry.
No,
If the
you're good.
Dreadlords revealed to him a bunch about himself in a sense, just by like saying like you think you know what the cosmos is, but you're more like you're the terrible demon thing coming to destroy life, dude. And he'd be like, wait a minute, what? Like I thought I was the champion. It was supposed to be the good guy. Like it's
Yeah.
basically falling down,
Yeah, I mean,
What
having
happened?
your
I'm the
whole
bad
world
guy?
turned on yourself and thinking like, oh my god, like, it's so fucked up because with the Dreadlords, it's like I would assume that's bad, but is it true? Like, is it a lie? The Dreadlords, I'd say, are pretty good at manipulation and stuff like that. But I've always wondered, like, is it? And if that were the case, did the Titans? Like they say that he went off in the cosmos by himself and he was isolated and stuff, but it's like really no one knew where he was. Like no one was keeping tabs on him at all. Like no, I don't know. It just seemed very sketchy to me, and it just sucks because I think what it's my interpretation in this case of the enslaved by your own emotions is allegorical for the idea of like if you can't if you can't reconcile and accept your own emotions, then other people can manipulate you for evil things and make you be the bad guy, even if you don't want to be the bad guy. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what Sargeras is for me, is the epitome of wanting to do the right thing and being manipulated into being the bad guy, even if it's the last thing you wanted. And that is so fucking evil. Like I
Yeah.
can't even fathom how evil that is. But because if
It
they
kind of
had,
fits with how he says he's like Eternals aren't supposed to have free will in
yeah,
a sense that would align with how he's just been like destined to be this destroyer, even though he doesn't want to be, perhaps. And
and that's
that could
hard.
be
Yeah, so I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at cutting you off. Continue.
okay. No worries. No, I'm bad for it too. No, that was basically the thought.
Well, I was just gonna say that's kind of, that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Of like, man, if I could get past some of these own things of my own, like, what could I create? What could I work together with people to create? Instead of being a destroyer, instead of being the I gotta work by myself and I gotta do this and I gotta do that and all the other people in the community fucking hate me or whatever. It's like letting that go because really who is saying that? It's me. It's coming out of my own head, and it's an example of like it's very powerful for me because it makes me think about my own life of like how can I prove to myself that I have free will, that I'm not like a Sargeras who is like eternally shackled by his own emotions or whatever, right? How can I prove to be able to break free from that? And so I personally derive a tremendous amount of meaning from World of Warcraft story, specifically that story related to Sargeras and all of that too. So that's just one other interpretation of like, look, I would be willing to concede that maybe he isn't flat out mind controlled. There is a shitload of evidence to suggest it, and especially the most recent entry in Chronicle Volume 4 about Anduin's domination is incredibly suggestive of the same thing with Sargeras, especially the music that plays. Like there really is a tremendous amount of suggestion, but it could also be that it's not so cut and dry. Maybe
Yeah, the
it
question I
is
would have
deeper.
about that Lem moment is that he does have broken chains on him in that point, but I'd agree with you when it comes to like when he's in the Titan Pantheon and he is covered in the blue runes and stuff. It is hard to deny that he looks like he could be like just the same way the Lich King and Anduin, like they kind of have the runes on the armor. It's like but when he's stabbing Azeroth, I've been wanting to ask you about that. Like in that moment he looks freer than ever. So even
Yeah,
if
it's that I trust me. I mean, I wish that I don't know. I'm so unsure at this point about it because have you seen my interpretation of like what Gorshalak is? Like
I
what the weapon actually like is?
retell me because maybe I've
So
heard you say it a couple ways, or I'm just conflating regular lore. So go ahead.
so so I think that what Chronicle Volume 4 suggests what it says about Anduin, where when he was being dominated by the jailer, it was his, good heart and connection to the light was able to actually mask the fact that he was being mind controlled. Um, you know, uh, I am of the opinion that the seed of the Pantheon is actually part of the weapon. I think the seed of the Pantheon is part of Gorshalak. And
Oh,
my
right, with the sword, yeah, how it looks the same
right.
on there.
Right. And
Yep.
so in this way, like, I guess I find myself stuck in a situation where I'm like, it could still appear like he is free. The confliction exists in this fact. I think that what the sword did, I think was a good, excuse me, I think it was a good thing. I think that it put the soul back together, right? So I have that belief, but then at the same
Mhm.
time, I think that it's possible the Titans controlled him and made him do it. So I'm like, wait a second, doesn't that mean that the Titans are the ones that did it? So it's like, so in this way, the Titans control him, they get him to do it. He looks like the bad guy. He takes the fall essentially as the bad guy while potentially being dominated. So I just
I get you, yeah.
it's hard
No, I
for
see
me.
it.
I want to believe that he's free and that he's making that choice himself. The chains on the broken chains thing, I really would have preferred if one of the links was like clearly broken. All of the links are still whole. Now one has more than the other.
Oh,
One has like
okay.
3 and the other has like 4 or 2 or something like that. But none of the chains are actually broken, and that's what
Interesting.
that's what alarms me is that like they're not actually broken.
He does have the death like skull on his belt too, so it's like, is he dominated here? Who knows? But
Yeah, and then
yeah,
his face after he's getting pulled away, he looks surprised. And someone said in the
good
chat,
point. Yeah.
swords aren't known for putting things together. That's you're very right. You're very right. But if you could reverse engineer the mechanism that is a Mournblade that splits the soul in two, then I feel that you could make a sword that could blend two souls back together. And I honestly feel like Anduin's sword Charlemagne is also trying to suggest that a similar kind of concept of like a split blade, a unified blade, souls in a blade. Mournblades very much go that way.
Or like maybe he was trying to take the matrix of leadership from Azeroth the same way Anduin took the sigil.
Yeah, and I mean, that's
Like if
that's a really good idea there.
he lost it at one point, like if he was originally the guy who was like, I'm holding this thing, and the
And
Titans look to me as their champion, and
and if you
yeah,
don't have it, does that make you susceptible to domination? Because
yeah, interesting.
that's the thing, right? Like Azeroth could not be controlled. Zoval tried it, and the thing was is that when you pull the energy out of Sargeras' sword back in Legion when we used our weapons to do it, you can see that there's a big flaming ball of fire beneath
Yep.
the darkness in the sword. And Akalon put out this idea where he said, I think Sargeras soulbound himself to Azeroth, and I think that's a fucking phenomenal idea, dude. I
Yeah.
I think that's
Like an
so
escape
good.
plan in a sense, and
Yeah, in that way, it leads me back of like, man, I do want to believe he had free will. I want to believe it was the plan. I want to believe he outplayed the Titans, and I want to believe that he's not controlled. That's what I want to believe, but I am ever fearful of the perspective, and the Titans sure would want us to think that he was in control right there. They sure would want us to think that they had nothing to do with it, and we don't actually know the outcome or Sargeras' state immediately after the fact. And I think that
yeah.
narratively, to me, just it really like leaves open the possibility of like he really could have been under control, under their control right there.
I gotta take a quick restroom break, but I have some more questions about the void if you're down to
Oh,
chat for a
dude.
couple more minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'll be right back. Just engage
Yeah.
your chat because I've been hogging all the time.
No, not a problem. I'm gonna actually use the bathroom too, and I'll be right back.
All right. All right, good. Because my thinking was, man, like this could result in a very cool video between him and I. There's just some stuff that like I would want to turn into a slightly more cinematic retelling if I had the chance, like just for the hell of it. And he's definitely already kind of dropped his tag on the Argus side of the map, you know, so I can't ignore it.
Alright. Sorry about that, chat.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you. You as well. But yeah, I'm down to talk about the void.
Oh, right. So, I mean, one of the bigger things, like, we kind of got past some of the hurdles of, like, thinking about the realms and their opposites of, like, chaos and order,
Sure.
which is already a bit of a mind leap. But I think a lot of people would also, and I am wrestling with it a bit, with the void relating to Argus. And so, what do you make of that? Because I know you link the old gods a lot to Argus, and you think of them as not just void, but so, yeah.
I think that I think that this is where we get into the blending and melding of forces. Because I think that the old gods, similar to the Titans, have so far shown some unique alignments for powers. So, for instance, N'Zoth, much more aligned with flame and shadow than the others. Yogg-Saron, much more aligned with death and necromancy than the others. Y'Shaarj, seemingly much more aligned with spirit and maybe even decay than the others. He is depicted with a green, almost nature-esque or even fell kind of effect to him in his art.
Yeah.
So I've always wondered.
You point out the stag thing. I've seen you point that out. It
Yeah.
looks like a little bit like a golden stag crest.
Yeah, right around his eye in the center. And I really do think that the serpents will relate back to life and to Elune and to Eonar. I think that Y'Shaarj doesn't actually have. I don't think people are probably going to hate this. I don't think Y'Shaarj is an evil god at all. Actually, my interpretation of Y'Shaarj is that it's like an emotional and spiritual lesson kind of god, where you can exchange one thing for the other and grapple with it and overcome it. And maybe by overcoming your darknesses, your lights are way brighter than they ever were before. Y'Shaarj to me symbolizes the opportunity for like growth and for overcoming your burdens. And that to me is what the Shah represent. So
integration of shadow, even not even just overcoming.
Overcome. And that's even the language that we use to speak about it, even myself, is so charged against it, like it's a bad thing. And I appreciate
Titans, man. Well,
it's just life. It's just life. You know, it's why you know many people are resistant to tackling mental health issues and those kinds of things. I just think it's we're so combative against it, like it's the enemy, and it doesn't have to be actually. So back to Argus. When I think of creation and destruction, I think of that being the term to cover the three aspects that you identified for the two forces that are made of the three, right? So in this way, I don't think of Argus as just death. I almost wonder if the kind of chaos and destruction, consumption even, which he could represent, maybe that is what the void and what these other powers that are associated. I can't remember what do you? I gotta pull it up again here. Let's see if I don't
I
have it.
suppose life hungers as well, right? Not just void, but
Yeah, and there's also that 6 seats at the high table, 6 mouths that hunger, one shall consume the others. Um, 6 mouth, yeah, one will consume all others. So I've thought about that the 6 cosmic forces as we know them, as for in Farim's like interpretation, the 6 are one and the 7 the other. I guess my interpretation of that was that the 6 cosmic forces that we know, whether it's life, order, light, death, chaos, or shadow, they're all consuming forces. They're all fueled by
right.
creation, and creation is the 7th, the other thing, or vice versa, whatever it might be. So I guess this is like long-winded. What I'm trying to say is that I think that Argus in his primordial form encompasses more than just one aspect, and I think Void might be one of those aspects.
Okay, so you wouldn't
Yeah.
even shy away from poor, like, because
No.
he is called the Dark Titan, and he lives maybe in the Great Dark Beyond.
Yeah.
That's part of the. I didn't even mention that yet. Like
Wouldn't
the
shy away
idea that
from
the
it
Dark
at all.
Titan. Yeah. Okay, so because then the
Yeah.
Void Lord story could be totally bunk,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be they're just calling Argus a Void Lord. But
Yes.
except we
I
know about
fucking love
Void
this guy,
Lords, so then
Chad.
what are those? No, no.
I fucking love this
but
guy,
then,
dude. Do you fucking hear what
but
this guy's saying right now? This is unbelievable. This
But
is
then we have to
amazing.
question what actually are the Void Lords. Like, what is Dementius then? Like, maybe are
Right.
they just calling it that, or do they have
Well,
their own nature that we are also conflating? I don't know.
I think that is the case. I mean, we've seen Naru turn into a Void Lord. Like I've seen.
Kind of, yeah. The Void God, and
Well,
if I had to bet too, I think the Blizzard would make the distinction between Void God and Void Lord because you already have old gods aligned with that. So you
and
don't want to have people thinking like, oh, Void God and old gods. Like, oops,
that's the
alliteration.
problem is that they are so like. And people say, well, it's lords with a lowercase l. Go run Halls of Origination. The fucking boss Setesh has
Yeah,
ads in front of it that literally summon a Void Lord, right? Like
yeah.
we've seen an Oshogun, we've seen a Naru turn into. I don't believe he was referred to as a Void God. I thought he was referred to as a Void Lord, but it doesn't really matter. Void God, Void Lord, whatever. I think it's funny how that's kind of unclear. Like what does that mean? Like, can Decimatus, for instance, turn into just as massive and consuming of a Void Lord as Dementius by just virtue of being summoned and consuming? Like, why is Dementius regarded above others? Like, for whatever reason, like, is there actually a hierarchical structure to that, or is it just about who makes who gets in and who takes advantage of the opportunity kind of thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Have you? Go ahead.
though there's instances for like in 1000 Years of War where there's like a demon that Illyria fights. What's up, Vigilante? I'm good. I'm good. Just chatting with Xaxxas about some lore right now. She there's a demon that says that Illyria commands the power of the final death. And it's like, okay, dude, that's either like a weird way of saying that she can take him into the nether and kill him, or that the void, as it were, is the final death in the eyes of this fucking demon. And when I think about the inevitable consumption of the universe, I used to think that it was death, but the cruel frozen void beyond even that does make more sense to me, honestly, especially if we're comparing it to real life. Like everything will die,
Yeah.
technically, yes, but then the frozen void of everything after that will kind of consume it all. So yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but that's what happens. But yeah.
No, yeah, that's interesting. I actually just had a thought off of this about the idea that yeah, like you're right to still compare the void to like a destructive sort of consuming force, and I start to think, well, it is actually opposite of like the light. The light is the one that produces the void. So maybe
Well, the
just
light
trying.
also does a lot of preservation, and so when I think of the
Yeah,
light and the void, I think of them as stasis, and preservation and entropy and activity, as it were. So, as you know, not my favorite person to quote, but Alex Afrasiabi said something back in the days of Legion where he said, what happens when we go, to these other realms and we see, worlds encased in these, massive pink and, gold crystals of the Naru
yeah,
and that stuff. And it's like, I guess just in my perspective, it's like one, very much can lead to the other. They pull the whole light and dark from light comes dark and darkness light shit all the time. But I've just always been extremely like weary of that because I've never seen a natural instance, and perhaps Belladar will be the first. I don't know. I can already make an argument against why this wouldn't be the case, but I've never seen a natural instance of a void entity returning to a light state. Every time I've ever seen that, mortals are involved. Mortals are
Yeah.
doing a ritual or they're doing something. Velen's bathing a Naru in the Sunwell. Velen's sacrificing himself to the Naru. Something like that. We're doing a ritual in the Netherlight Temple to bring it back. And so I've always been very concerned that the light, as we know it, the holy light, maybe like doesn't belong, or that something with it is wrong. And this is what originally led me to the ideas way back in the day of like the pillars of the holy light and what they represent. And if what Chronicle says is true about the light leading to the void, then doesn't that not suggest that if the light wins and takes over everything, that everything will inevitably be doomed into the cycle of the eternal battle between light and void, or doomed to the void itself? And so that's what led me to say things like, yeah, we don't want the light to win, which then people interpreted from that, we want the void to win, which is also not what I want, because
No.
if the light wins, then the void wins.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I don't really know if, yeah.
Well, I was going to mention, I guess I was reaching a bit of a contradiction in my own thinking, but I want to address it, is the idea that the void, as like if we paired Azeroth and the dark and the twisting nether to the realms of the light void, light order and mortis, in this case like death soul, the void actually coming from the light and acting as a destroying force would still kind of fit in with Azeroth the Destructor, because whether or not she wakes up as the Radiant Song or the what do they call it?
I would
There's
call it the void song, but I don't know if that's
the Void Song,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So maybe that's part of her being a destroyer, but that does kind of contradict to the idea that Argus, as the prime world soul of the Great Dark, would be inherently the one who has this void. Because that's where I'm like, it's a little bit easier when we think of Argus as like if he is prime like destruction in the beginning, then yeah, like the void could be linked to him. And but if we're going along this idea that it's more of like the mortality of shadow and life combining, which is like death actually as we understand it, like decay.
right.
I don't know, I'm trying to think about, so like I could see Argus linking to the old gods maybe more than the cosmic void, if you know what I mean.
And I would prefer that as well, frankly. I think that stars and darkness and I personally think order would be really cool to link to the void as like, a force behind it. But yeah, I see where you're coming from, and I
I
would
thought
agree.
that too, because it's totally empty. Like if you isn't it the plane of order would be like if you have a void thing, it's like everything's all separated and
Yeah,
I
I
don't
would
know,
think
that's
it's
a
like
good
almost
point
as
too.
orderly as it could possibly get. Like one might think that holding everything in stasis with the light would be it, but when you think about if everything is consumed by entropy and there's no more movement or dissipation, and basically the cosmos reaches like equilibrium and energy state, like it theoretically won't change anymore. And if it
Yeah, does
doesn't
it become a stasis or yeah.
exactly.
But
And
that we have seen the Void Supernova with Anshul anyways. That's like what the spell he's using. So maybe after a while these black holes collapse and they rebirth in a sense too. So that
they
could
may.
be sort of like to the Argus thing still, where maybe there are aspects of creation and destruction to both of these beings, like where Argus has this built-in version of creation through life magic, and then shadow magic, and Chaos doesn't really fall into that. Chaos just happens to result in violence, which causes death among the weak. But in this case, you'd have like a built-in combat. Maybe that's a good. Oh, that could be the way of looking at it. Like the light and the void are actually the weapons of Azeroth and Argus in their battle with each other. Because like we're talking about this idea that they before they settled into the worlds, perhaps they were just like in a conflict and like if we go by the Transformer story, who knows how one for one that would be? But like again, it's fun to think about.
This
So
this really makes me think of the early days of Azeroth and Eyes of the Earth Mother, when it talks about how when the Earth Mother awoke, there was already darkness in the world. It was
yes,
already
yeah,
there. And that was before the Tauren or the Shuhalo were even created. And it just in the lessons that it says that they have to teach, I just thought were like, it felt like a slap in the face. It was like, lessons of war and betrayal and those things, and it's like, holy fuck, dude. Like, this is the kind of
Mhm.
shit, this is the kind of darkness that I feel like Argus would represent. And in a way that ties into the void as well, where it's like it's the anxieties, it's the it's the distrust, it's the uncertainty, if you will. And I just thought, like,
Mm.
I think that that does kind of tie nicely into it. Like the war of light and dark is representative of a war between creation and destruction, the very same way that any conflict between life and death is, and any conflict between order and chaos are. They're kind of all inexorably linked to that source, and as a result, interact with each other in those ways, kind of without, without any control, as we were discussing earlier,
Mhm.
and how that
Yeah, no, that
can.
might.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all. Go ahead. Just if it's just along the same lines, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I just don't know though, because it's like, were the darknesses in the world because someone else put them there? Were they inherently part of the world, and that's what they're trying to get across? Like the darkness that they try to make out as like separate from the Earth Mother, maybe is not separate, because when you think about it, like the story, and I know it's all a fairy tale and stuff, but the myth claims that like she becomes corrupted by this darkness and sends her children away into the sky, because partly because she's concerned that she will end up corrupting them, because because she takes on the darkness to herself. And I always just thought that that kind of gave vibes of like a mother or parent with some kind of like terminal illness, which whether or not they understand is or isn't like virulent or passable, like being something that terrifies them, like that darkness within, if you will. I don't know. And that being Argus, and that kind of being what set the whole conflict off, because I'm not going to be surprised if they tie this all back to home and family and those things, the things worth fighting for, because at the end of the day, the Anshe and Musha story, if it is as literal as it is often interpreted, kind of suggests like something real bad happened to mom, and brother and sister got in trouble as a result of their involvement in the conflict, and may have even, you know, strayed apart, turned against each other, had to work together the entire time. So anyway, yeah, I just think
Mhm.
cyclically it kind of can relate back to a familial drama, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean the important part is like not making Azeroth seem too much like a villain because I guess in this what I've been starting to think about her the last like I guess 24 hours here basically like I said it broke my mind a bit. I was like, "Oh gosh, like she's like this extremely righteous paladin who's going to burn away existence in order to forge a new one." It sounds a lot like Sargeras in a sense, right? Like
Right.
I would think if that's what the Titans are going to do, like they want to re-originate the universe, we know that. So if they would just use Azeroth to
And
do it, or whether or not she awakes and she can just do it herself, to battle Argus again, essentially, who is the darkness, who is life and chaos.
what's really scary as well is like the Titans could have already done that. I mean, they did something that is referred to as the great ordering of the cosmos. And
Yeah.
like, you talk to Rygelon, or you don't really talk to him, but Rygelon, that boss from Sepulchre, speaks to you and says shit like, through death will come order. Realities folding upon
Hmm.
realities. Cosmic collapse
Oh,
is,
good
is
point.
inevitable. Existence will be reordered. And this guy's like dominated by Zoval. like,
Yeah.
like,
Who doesn't want the cosmos divided? Actually, that's a good point you mentioned because I was going like some of this initial thought did stem from a bit of a mistake I was making by attributing Caesara's quotes to Desagny, who was corrupted by the jailer. I started to think for a second, like, oh whoa, did we get a version of the jailer's like intended cosmos that was being? But now I realized that's not the case. Like Caesara's not dominated. However, this
right.
idea that there might be, as you were just saying, like a the ordering of the cosmos, I was starting to wonder, is that different from the great ordering of light and shadow? Like, the great ordering of light and shadow to me might be what created the twisty nether and the great dark beyond. And then the ordering of the cosmos is what the Titans were basically sent on their mission to do by Azeroth. Like,
Yeah.
all these primordial forces exist in the chaos of the great dark, so go use them and shape them.
Yeah. Make something from it. Basically participate in the song of Eru Luvatar,
Yeah, it's like a
participate
new
in
stage of
creation.
creation.
Yep.
Yes, yeah. Like
Yeah.
we had the great ordering that maybe Illume did, whether or not it was like by accident or she split apart, and that was like the original. And then now we have like the stage of the Titans, and they've, as you like, as I my original chart that you've probably seen floating around, where it's the yin yang, but like I said, I had the life, shadow, disorder, and death were all in the twisting nether. It's almost
Thank
more
you
like
very
how I
much,
see
Sam
the
Huin. I
Titans'
appreciate that, man.
perspective of how they would like, how they would like it if they had a choice. It would be in eternal conflict because all they want to do is keep dividing. Like all of the bad stuff goes to the nether because we know how to trap it there, and how
Yeah,
do you
just
even deal with
separating
the
it out.
void, right?
That
Yeah,
was how I kind of saw the Nether for a while. Is like, yeah, like maybe it's kind of like that trash can, like we said earlier, of like maybe they took all of the chaos and separated it out. That they make it sound like that happened naturally, but I'm not so sure. Like that kind of sounds
yeah,
like
because
something that
it's
was
like
done.
funny enough, the Nathrazim are the first demons that are talked about in Chronicle, and it says like just as life spurred in the Great Dark Beyond, it also did in the Twisting Nether, and in the form of quote demons. But like we're getting this history against like who are the demons really,
Right.
and so
Counter that
and
as
then
well.
I
Intimidating that demon and asking him like, what were you before? Before Sargeras's betrayal, you existed. What were you?
and that's interesting because sacrificial magic is what he said that they did.
Yeah.
They were the hounds for sacrificial magic, and so I'm thinking about how
And
that ties
police the
to
use of
life.
arcane magic as well.
Oh, police the use of arcane and sacrificial. Okay.
They were specifically attuned to
Wow.
hunt down those doing sacrificial magic as it was regarded as the most like profane, crime against life or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting because aren't the trolls all into that? And
Yep. Heavily
I know.
sacrificial. They used to be until Dazar the First King, I'm pretty sure, got involved with Titan stuff and rose them
Yeah,
out of the mud and sticks of Nazmir, and then they gave up the old ways of blood. Which I'm pretty sure was
interesting.
when the Titans probably concluded their fucking research, because they were not only using Loa and experimenting on them, but I'm sure that they got blood and stuff like that from blood sacrifices from trolls. All the trolls' roads and Zuldazar and surrounding areas lead to the top of Uldir, which was probably a very popular sacrificial altar for them, if I had to guess.
Right. Yeah.
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 Yeah. But
And so I
yeah.
guess that's interesting because isn't that like it's using life magic, and so it's like a perversion of life magic, or maybe that's just something about because it's all shadow and death. Or
Yeah.
sorry, not death. I mean, there's death there, but maybe I'm just trying to think about why the Titans would oppose that under this like new view I'm trying to build. Where it's like, okay, well, if Argus is the source of sacrificial magic because he's the source of the life and the shadow, but and the chaos, I'm not sure, but because that wouldn't align with the death magic. But then it's like
So
maybe sacrificial magic isn't death magic. Maybe we get that wrong. Like,
it
is
might,
it right?
exactly. It might be life magic. It might be something that we don't. That's why when I say like Fel is like a life fire, I'm like kind of half memeing because I'm like, well, it's like they call it death magic, but it's green fire fueled by life. Like
Yeah,
it's life fire. Like what the fuck?
yeah,
Uh
it's burning life.
yeah,
So
it's
yes,
like soul of flame. And one thing that I've noticed that I wanted to point out to you here that I just noticed looking at Rigelon's loot, he drops an item called Antumbra, Shadow of the Cosmos. And that just made me think of like Antorus, Antumbra, Antorus. He
oh
also drops
yeah.
Devastated World Shard, which is a sword with flavor text that says a bleak reminder to worlds unworthy. So I just from
Diablo
this,
reference.
it could be. Yeah, it could just be that. Oh yeah, World Shard. Yeah. Yeah. Treads of Titanic Curiosity, because the Titans allegedly sent Rigelon because they were, curious. It was drawn to the activity there. So the Titans outwardly sent a Constellar to check on a place that is in the core of Zareth Mortis. Like, I don't know if people really register that, but Rigelon
Yeah,
and
no,
Titan
it's
Construct
crazy.
is there because of that. Yeah. Astral Verdict, Heraldric Ring, and then he drops a trinket called Grim Eclipse, which
Mm,
involves a quasar, which I thought you might find interesting considering the Anshul stuff.
yeah, no, definitely. The Constellar is so mysterious at this point, and they actually that's one of the things that it's
It's
easy to
fucking
just say like, oh
Constellars.
yeah, they're tasked there to go by the Titans, but what
They
do they?
all share their naming scheme with Norganon, and that's the thing
Yep,
that's the most alarming to me. And it makes me think that they're all actually his. Um, or
mirror image.
yep, fragments of
That's a
him,
that's a mage spell.
disc copies. Um,
Yeah.
there's an achievement on this boss where if everyone is under the effects of Herald of the Cosmos, you get an achievement called We Are All Made of Stars. That's obviously an allusion to just like some real life shit. But also,
Mm.
when he dies, he says, "You fail to see what is coming," which is another allusion to foresight, which directly ties to Norganon. One other thing, back to the Void thing, was that I've posited that maybe Xalatath is telling the truth a lot of the time, and when she says that the Titans didn't understand the Void, maybe it's true.
Yeah.
And it could be, I've proposed before that maybe the Titans confused Void for death, and that they think that any form of chaos is the Void or something like that.
Oh, you have a good point there, because their version of like their Mortis understanding of death is all spiritual and soul and eternal. So
Right,
that would be
not
like if
mortal.
all of a sudden, yeah, well, the void is the permadeath, like Illyria's demon says. Then it's like if it can destroy souls, which are supposed to be
Yeah,
eternal, to
yeah,
them that would be death. Yeah.
dismantling or the thing that scares me the most about the Light and Void is the concept of integration. I don't know if it's plausible or provable, but I've thrown out the idea before that the Light and the Void could conceptually replace all the other forces in the cosmos. Like light could be order, void could be chaos, light could be life, void could be death. And void could be shadow, light could be radiance, and so in this way, holy light and void could basically be a gross misrepresentation of actual forces that's crawling across the cosmos and actually slowly replacing everything. Which is fucking terrifying because then like there's so many theories upon theories. Like what I would prefer is that time was ordered into two different things, and that Amanthul once commanded that power, and now it's been split into what we call holy light and void. And that's why when you combine them together, you see things happening in real time. Like you see actual destiny like Illyria. And so I would really love for like if they split time into light and void, and then light and void as a dual for like an opposing force to each other that isn't really supposed to exist, kind of like causing this eternal conflict that's basically doomed the cosmos. And in this way, then basically to say that light and void are unnatural and maybe should not exist in those separate forms, and maybe they're only supposed to exist together. But there's not really any proof of that. But anyway, yeah, the base concept is just confusing one cosmic force for another. And based on, if it's true anyway, what the Dreadlords wrote in their journal, where they said that, right, their little feelings in there. Today I killed and slew 1,700 mortals and darkened fire. I don't know how to feel about it. Anyway, I just thought maybe if it's true that they actually deceived Sargeras, and then Sargeras's misunderstanding led to Agrimar's misunderstanding, and therefore the rest of the Titans' misunderstanding, that could actually be plausible, that like what the Dreadlords said when they remarked that they were going to lie in the midst of the Void Lords and sow lies in their midst, and that they sought to position them as a foil against their other rivals. In other words, they would try to make them look bad so that the other rivals would attack them, which worked.
Yeah.
The Titans seem to be waging war on the Void. At least that's what we're told. And it could be this fundamental misunderstanding about what the old gods are and what the Void is that leads the Titans to want to eradicate mortal life, because they might be confusing mortals for the Void. Because think about it. If they really think that flesh is just the result of Void corruption, that's a fucking problem for us, because we know that's not true. We know that flesh is touched by multiple forces, whether it's spirit or decay. We know, or it's suggested anyway via one of the dream journals by one of the dragons writing in there, that mortals are touched by many cosmic forces. So if the Titans believe that that whatever source is where mortals come from is tied to the Void, that's a fucking huge problem, especially if it's not true, because then they start to exert order and will upon systems that don't need it, and then it's all completely fucked from there on. And if Sargeras realizes that they're wrong, and if he learned that by, let's say, maybe working with N'Zoth, who we're meant to believe is an agent of the Void but may not actually be, then it could be that Sargeras learned the truth, probably through the Old God's connection to Azeroth at this point, and is trying to stop the Titans from doing it, because what the Titans are doing is potentially threatening to wipe out the very source of souls and mortality in the entire cosmos. And if they do that, it's over. Like it's It's over.
Yeah.
That's end.
Yeah, like
That's
a
the
Team
end.
Mechagon style thing,
Yeah,
right? Like that's
done.
they want to purge all of it.
Yeah, thanks
Now,
for letting
what's
me rant there,
interesting
dude. I
about that
appreciate that.
no worries. Yeah, I write little like kind of notes. I'm listening because it's interesting. I like to follow up and with the idea of the
I should
you
do
know the
that.
void. What if they're like if the void and life come from the same source in Argus, then it's kind of a neat thing there. In that case, it's like well, no wonder they're conflating them,
I've heard that
and
before.
it's almost right. And so I was thinking about flesh is his gift. He is your true creator.
Yep.
But if that's about Argus,
Uh
you
huh.
know, and
Oh my God, Zach, this is the best chat.
well, look, so
That's
there's
great.
still more of this we could go into with like the origin of the old god stuff is so iffy to me, but in this case, I'm maybe seeing why they would be leveraging. It's hard for me to think about why Titans would purposely make an old god, that's for sure. I could think of it as being like an accident that happened trying to abuse the powers of Session now, if that is part of Argus. Could even be one of his antlers.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, and yeah, yeah, yeah. They get bloody and gross when they like first grow in, and when they shed.
right,
Yeah, they're disgusting.
you were just saying that. I remember you saying that last week. That's right.
Yeah.
Why would
Um,
you saw a moose?
on Gahoon, Gahoon was interesting to me because it seems like Gahoon specifically embodies a curse of undeath that spreads and causes that mycelial growth or mycelium growth. You know more about that shit than I do, but um, it almost seemed like what they did with Gahoon was they engineered an old god that would spread a plague of undeath and make anything that it touched immortal. Now they make it out to be like, oh, we're trying to
Hmm.
eradicate it and get rid of it, but I'm not really so sure
Well,
about that.
I would just make comparisons to the spore mounds you've heard of, like the what
Yeah,
The Last of Us, of course, shows with the what were they called exactly? Those types of fungus, the cordyceps. You know,
mm,
the idea they'll take over the host and zombify.
that's fucking
Uh,
terrifying, dude. And we
yeah,
see some of that
I
shit with spore mound descendants in alternate Draenor.
exactly. That's why maybe I just misspoke, but that's what I'm saying. Is that
Oh,
like
sorry.
the yeah, yeah, the comparison I'd make to what happens with the mycelium stuff in Cahoon's area is probably them recreating some of the weird spore mound undead stuff. And
Oh, I see.
in a
I'm
way,
sorry.
Maldraxxus has always been linked to the fungus and the undead, right? Like we've known from the scourge magic, anyways. In the Eastern Plague Lands, they grow these giant mushrooms for some reason, and they, of course, it happens to be like these. They eat infected grain, you know, like it's the grain infected with plague that's built from types of fungus.
And go figure, the
And
Maldraxxus necromancy magic's fucking green.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
fucking green. Like, are you shitting me?
emerald even like
Yeah.
yeah, it's very much the same color. So that's it's interesting because it's like it's life, even though it's disguised as death. That is arguably in Maldraxxus one of the
Hmm.
weirdest. There's Ardenweld, but Ardenweld's so obviously like it's just a part of the dream, which is
I mean, I wouldn't
I
even
don't
be
know.
against the idea that in some capacity, Yogg Saron once ruled Maldraxxus, and I know I've heard that idea go around before as well. That like
Hmm.
Maldraxxus was usurped, or
Did they shape these realms beforehand, before the Titans arrived at all? Like, yeah.
yeah, I mean, well,
'Cause maybe
yeah,
the Shadowlands would have been around Azeroth. If we're talking about the Emerald
uh-huh.
Dream as being something that existed around Argus, maybe the Shadowlands side of it. I was starting to conflate the Shadowlands and the Twisting Nether and the Dream as all being one thing that had been merged. But now, like I said, I'm almost thinking this more like, no, the Shadowlands is kind of like like I said, the realms of light and order and death. It happens to be like the astral dimension. It's more fitting than calling the like. It's weird because I wouldn't think of an astral dimension as chaotic. I guess you know that's funny.
And
Weird,
why
just
is
double
that?
speak in the opening.
Why do you think that?
Well, astral stuff is usually linked to me with like stars to begin with. That's the first thought, and so
Okay.
stars we know are related to light and then order and no, yeah, I think there's a lot of the. Like, I've heard you lay out some of the thinking there before,
Yeah, I mean,
so
I
I
definitely,
think I
yeah.
agree.
I was just curious to see, yeah, why, how you landed there? Because I struggle with it. Like, on one hand, I feel like its impermeability and kind of warping to the perception of an individual makes me think chaotic. But then I also have to think like our perceptions are also grounded in what we call reality. And so
Mm.
when we go beyond that, we might have a really hard time perceiving and understanding it in like a meaningful way. But anyway, yeah, it's
Think oh, you know, what's interesting is in thinking a form of order, and if I recall, doesn't it say that demons are pretty much like thoughtlessly doing what they do in the opening bits of Chronicle? That it's like mindless. So I'm
In
just that's an
initially,
interesting
yeah,
thought.
when they're basically like coming through the tears between the twisting nether and reality, which are kind of just happening, by the way. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's like a solar flare where it just kind of like puts out mass radiation and they bleed together, and then through those rifts come demons without any order or purpose, which sounds and they would just raise mortal civilizations, which just doesn't sound right to me. To me that almost kind of sounds like that's maybe during the time where the Titans were having them punish people using arcane magics and sacrificial magics.
Yeah.
Um and then they could have got to a point where they needed someone to go clean their mess up, and that's when they sent Sargeras to do that. Um yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know in terms of like where the Shadowlands was and its position relative to other things. Like it's hard for me because I always follow the maps, and on almost every single map at this point there depicts 9 realms, including Azeroth. There are 8 orbiting bodies with Azeroth in the center, which aligns very well with Norse mythology. So
Right. Yeah.
they allege that each of the Titans came from different worlds. There's 9 Titans, by the way. So 9 realms, 9 Titans, 9 bodies. It kind of feels like maybe a Titan belonged to each of those. You know, maybe ENR belonged to the Emerald Dream, or Argus belonged there, and then someone else belonged to the Shadowlands, and what have you. But I do think that the Shadowlands, at least the world that we are interacting with, what I believe to be the shattered remnants of in Shadowlands, are there. The idea that it links to a greater plane that has a bunch of other planets and things that are all aligned with whatever that plane's prime force is one that like I think is interesting, but also potentially really like boring. I think multiverse stuff can get boring if it's too
Hmm.
formulaic, I guess. So, but yeah. Anyway, I'm just ranting again, but yeah,
No, it's fine. It's a whole there's a lot to think about there with Azeroth for some reason, like being able to act as a conduit for all souls in the universe. Like, how do the Titans manage that? And that's not like I assume it's the Titans who do, whoever the first ones are. Which, like, you know,
yeah,
even just watching this new Transformers movie was so funny because it's like, oh, Primus creates the first Transformers, the Primes. It's like, oh, those are the Titans, aka the first ones. Like, and then the
yeah.
Keepers are the Autobots, right? They're the second generation. It's just a bit funny that a lot of this first ones as being the Titan stuff is coded even in some of these older inspirations, perhaps. And
I
you know,
totally
the,
agree. Yeah, they're and the other thing is that like we've
or at least I
seen.
should. Sorry, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say we've seen the form of the Titans. We've seen that the Eternal Ones go into like robot bodies, but we don't really know the essence of the souls that inhabit those or where they really came from. So I've
Yeah.
always liked the idea of as well of like how do we know that the old gods aren't like something removed from these gods, or like their old bodies or something before these robots were made and put in and that they were put into, or something like that, like something that was actually more related to the old Shadowlands that was destroyed and like replaced with robots essentially, that they put their souls into. And I just think it's so fun to think about with them in terms of like how do we know that all of the souls that inhabit their cosmic spirits or whatever you want to call them are actually even from this realm. Like how do we know that one of them, like the Primus for instance, isn't a Titan or whatever the Titans are in this form? You know what I'm trying to say? Like how can you be sure that whatever inhabits the body, like Xalatath, is what you think it is?
Yeah. I wish Hope Blizzard would just kind of like get that out of the bag already.
I
I'm
know.
tired of looking at her fucking feet. Someone has to say it, guys. Can't keep happening.
It's
Okay, she's
fucking
not even
God.
an elf, and
She's
Blizzard has enough cool elves to look at, and they have on a track record of having annoying elves that people are sick of. So they need to kind of like show the
agreed.
Naru thing or whatever else is going on with her, please. But before midnight, even.
Yeah, I really want them to start to move these things along like pretty directly, dude. I agree. Uh yeah, I think that would be nice for them to start being more overt about it. And I think it's time. If they're doing what they're claiming that they're trying to do, then I think it's kind of inevitable that it needs to happen. Um
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean it's
And
kind of
back to
like
the
then with the
Shadowlands.
Titans. No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, so it's back to the Shadowlands thing being like we're also perceiving it through a lens of it already having been in perfect order for millennia, right? For aeons rather.
Yeah.
And so it's so hard to get an idea of what was the original conception of this. Like maybe the Emerald Dream in itself is already just what the Shadowlands was supposed to be that comes from Argus, you
Or
know, and
even the
they
Emerald
it's
Nightmare.
a realm. Well, yeah, maybe that because he's also Shadow, there's never been a separation between those until the Titans came along,
Ooh, I
even
like
more.
that. Like that even in
That's
that way, the nightmare and the dream should be one thing. They shouldn't be
Oh
separate.
yeah, like that's kind of my original like, when I was originally thinking of the Twisting
Yeah.
Nethers being more like the Shadowlands, that still fit for me. I was like, you know what? Like the whatever the old gods existed in Nyalotha is probably a lot like the same fabric that the dream is sitting on, and the nightmare is something that is it's almost like they've all been separated, I guess, but
Yeah.
originally it was like a nightmare and a dream at the same time. You know, like whatever the song was doing, and Argus fitting as like the god of regrowth and of shadow and of chaos would kind of fit into that. That they came along and were like, okay, we'll base the Winter Queen on you, you stag beauty, because that's a
Yeah.
good point. She has antlers, and
Yeah.
then you know different parts of Argus being represented in the Shadowlands they eventually create would like I could see that working rather
Yes.
than the Shadowlands coming from Argus, so to speak. And like our yeah,
I
it's
like that. I like that, and I can, I can look. There's so many theories and so many ways to connect Argus to Zoval. Whether it's just the fact that they both have scythes, and the one that Zoval drops has flavor text that says "Begin the end of all things" on it, or
yeah.
or the fact that Argus's soul flies directly into the Arbiter's chest, where the literal fucking crux of Zoval's power is sitting inside of this Arbiter. Like that's pretty direct as well, and like
Yeah.
yeah, I
Where they
think
used its power to revive their fallen
exact.
souls is
Yeah.
kind of a description of what the Shadowlands does for us, you
Yep.
know? So
Yep.
it's like, wouldn't they do that
I
for
love that.
themselves? And yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah, and
I definitely agree with that.
and
They, they,
it,
they did something horrible to him, and they probably used pieces of him. Yeah.
even the sword when it says it, it was bound by something powerful. It doesn't say someone even necessarily. So when you think about being bound
Yeah.
by a blade, for instance, being bound by being slain and literally bound into Sargeras's blade, could have fucking been a thing. And I mean, dude, I really
Does
like
that tie into Argus, or sorry, Sargeras being on Azeroth to shape the Shadowlands, though? Because that's sometimes I will admit I've been lost with some of your theories saying that like Sargeras was definitely involved in
well,
shaping Azeroth.
So here's where that comes from. Even Melkor took part in the songs of creation. Eru
Yeah,
Ilúvatar allowed him to, and then we have weird coincidences, and maybe they're just lacking the context and reveals for me to understand them. But there's things like we're supposed to believe there's inconsistencies. Like Eonar has two dragon aspects, nature and life, or dreams, or whatever, dreams and life in the case of Ysera and Alexstrasza. We already found out that's not true. So who
yeah.
else who else has a dragon aspect? You got Aman'Thul with Nosdormu. You got uh uh fucking Norganon with Malagos. You got fucking Khazgaroth with Neltharion, and then Golganeth can
Yep.
just go eat shit. And Agramar can also just go eat shit because no one gives a fuck about them. Here's just what gets me is that Deathwing, who is like the black and orange metal dragon who calls himself the Unmaker of Worlds, we're supposed to believe that guy is Khazgaroth's guy, which that could very well be the case. Like, I can accept that. Then we also have Odin, who is so clearly inspired by Sargeras at the very least that I'm like, okay, dude. Like, this guy got his powers from Aman'Thul? Like, what? He uses light,
Huh.
yes, to be sure, but this guy's like super arrogant, warrior coded, uses angels and shit. Like, he's arrogant, he is brash, he's separated himself from the rest of the pantheon. Why? Is it just because the system is built to repeat itself that Odin acts that way? Is it like inevitable? Or is it possible that there was someone else at some point present for the shaping and ordering and maybe songs of creation that could have been taking place on Azeroth that was then maybe not allowed to be a part of it later on? Like, it really just makes me think of Melkor, how even though everyone knows that he's like the bad guy, that he was still part of creation. And so I just have a really hard time believing that Sargeras had nothing to do with this world, especially with what I believe about Anshe and the Tauren. Like,
Yeah.
I am most positive that the Doom Lords stemmed from ancient Yongal or Tauren of some kind. They just look like demonic Tauren. So all of those things
Well,
just
it
make it
could tie
hard.
into the Argus thing. I mean,
Yeah,
hooves and horns, and then unbound life. You know,
yeah,
if we go with this new thought, and maybe there's a link there where with the Tauren being made by Aenar using Argus's power. You know, there could
and
be
maybe
a
not just
lot. Yeah.
Argus's. Maybe they were also leveraging Sargeras's power. If he has this flame, I don't know what this flame is, but this could be flames of life. This could be radiance, like the holy flame that the Arathi use. But like, it's all
Mhm.
demons being born of shadowy fire. Them taking. Maybe it wasn't Sargeras taking flame and shadow to make them. Maybe someone else was taking his flame and Argus's shadow and making them, or maybe by virtue of the connection between Sargeras and Argus, which I'm almost certain lies in the sword that he wields. Perhaps those powers were already connected. Sargeras and Argus already being soulbound, essentially forcefully, as a result of the use of the Mournblade that I think that they made him wield. So it's a lot of theorization on top of theorization to get to that point. But yeah,
No, I get you. There's a lot of interesting stuff there with the Tarn and Anshe, and I admit, like one of the things like the reason I ended up making that Crystal Stars video probably spurred off of trying to like in my head steel man your argument for like why how could if Sargeras is Anshe, that just means he's one son, but what does that say for all the other thousands? And like, was he the guy who went around creating stars? And I
I
never had
kind
to
of
like ask you these questions straight up, so
yeah.
it'd kind of be like, you know, I had to rationalize. Well, we already see links between Elune and stars, and Fazandi has links to Elune and Old God, so the common denominator there might be a star. I kind of reached some of these conclusions by almost trying to like be like, wait a minute, like how does that work? Like what does he mean? And so thanks for in a way like encouraging me to think about like the actual physicality of like where do the stars come from in the first place, and should we even think of like the core of Azeroth as a representative for what stars look like? Maybe not. Like maybe world souls are the ones who have that look about them, is what I was trying to suggest, and that our stars in WoW are not fire gas balls, you know.
Yeah.
So Sargeras might just be more of a reflection of his mother at this point, Azeroth. You know, like that would be the way I would think about it. That he's sort of in his fiery form, and when he's in his paladin form, so to speak, or warrior, whatever it was.
Yeah.
He's like the most righteous, like kind of destructive parts of her, and that's always what he was doing, whether it was destroying demons or life afterwards. Which who knows if there's a difference.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I like that interpretation, and I think that the flame form really is like I do think that's indicative of a very strong connection to Azeroth personally, and that none of the other Titans assume a form like that is greatly alarming. And leads me back to whether they were trying to or will attempt to utilize or steal that power is very fucking scary. There stories about the goddess Isis usurping the power of the sun god Ra, and that was done through learning his true name. And if what I say about Sargeras is maybe true, then if Eonar is connected in the ways that I think she is, her knowing something like the true name of Sargeras could even be leveraged in this case. There's so many different like little mythological interpretations that you can bake
Yeah.
into it, and I really yeah, I think it's really awesome that you've taken the time to like consider the source of the stars, because it isn't really something that I've thought too much about. Like what I've always thought about like the five suns and like what does that mean? Maybe the old gods relate to that, but I didn't really know how, or like now we're seeing these giant fucking crystals in the ground. I'm like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is going? And everyone's calling it a star, just like what happened with Kara in Shadow Moon Valley, right? This dark star. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's your ideas in those videos are like almost perplexed me, because I was like, fuck, I don't really know that I have really thought about what stars are and where they come from, and what you said there about maybe Azeroth isn't what we would normally attribute to like is a star. That could very well be true. Maybe she's some kind of massive cosmic soul that is, and then again it goes back to who is making the suns or stars then in that case. And that's where the Anshe and Musha thing comes in fucking strong
Mhm.
for me, is like it's them. Like it's them that made the Naru, that made the light and the dark, and that did these things, and they work in unison, but for whatever reason they're not anymore. But
That
yeah.
is that's interesting at that point, trying to think of Elune or Musha as like a daughter of Azeroth, because we were hinting at the idea of her being an offspring of like if a wild god type thing or something for Argus instead. Maybe she's imprisoned, like maybe the blue child could be relevant there to something like taken from Argus and brought to Azeroth and using his power there or something. But
Yeah,
I'm just trying
yeah.
to, yeah,
That
because
I like
in a
that
way
idea.
it does say that the Earth Mother is the one who creates the sun. If we just attributed that story, of course, to
True.
Azeroth,
That's a good
then
point.
she could be like when she was battling Argus, let's say before they went to sleep, she could have been the one on, fighting for the Elune side of the light stuff, because if they're both entities split from her, then maybe the connection between Elune and the stars and Azeroth is through the fact that like Azeroth was the one tending the crystal stars first, like she was the one who is going around trying to bring order and light, and then like souls, arguably, or managing the souls of the universe, and until they get put to sleep or something, or like again, I'm
Yeah.
just
Well, that's another aspect of it that I'm always like wondering about, and I think dreams are there's so many different like interpretations for dreams. Lovecraft obviously being one of the biggest ones for this game of like, is there a cycle where one of them is asleep and the other one is awake, and when one of them goes to sleep, the other one wakes up?
like the
One eye
opposite.
open,
Yeah.
one eye closed. Exactly, exactly, and like, and so yeah, I like that the interpretation of like Azeroth and Argus maybe directly individually or maybe together, came and basically gave rise to Elune and Anshe, which I think are combo forces as well. I don't think that they're just pure manifestations of one thing. That's why when people say that's
Oh, that's such a good point.
yeah, I don't think
Oh, is
Sargeras
she
is
like
like just fire. He can't be. He's got to be like fire and spirit. There's got to be something else in there.
So I meant actually the idea that like Luke could still be the daughter of Argus if he like inseminated Azeroth.
I mean,
In that case, if you were
her
to say Sargeras and
yeah,
Elune are basically the children of Argus
yes,
and Azeroth, yes, I
yes,
understand that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
could kind of fit.
And in Norse mythology, Ymir the Screamer is the father of all giants and the father of all gods. As
Because
a
you were
result,
saying, yeah, I think that he's a
yep,
screamer is like Argus,
yep.
yeah.
Argus
I see, yeah.
screams when he stands. They have the references through Deathwing that make allusions to the like you mentioned earlier, building the world out of his blood, out of his bones, out of his hair, out of those things. And
Mhm.
and I really yeah, I think that I really like that's why there's darkness inherent in the world, is because Argus was probably torn apart to help craft the world. But he's darkness. So what
Yeah.
happens? um and who knows, Azeroth we might have this completely wrong, and she might be the result of this huge conflict and not actually its progenitor. It could be both, but the idea that like the darkness and flesh that was rooted in the world, warred with the beautiful creations of Eonar, the Earth Mother, led to a creation of a soul of a kind that had never ever been, realized. This prime world soul, basically a god level soul and power that has the capacity for free will, maybe.
Mhm.
And so maybe this is all a giant alchemical result of something that was completely accidental. We have to consider that Azeroth isn't the creator and that she is not essential in the creation of the universe, but rather the result of this horrible conflict that's been going on. And basically and that's where I get a cycle from it. And that way I kind of think like Azeroth and Argus as hermaphroditic deity that like commands the entire cosmos. I can't, in my mind, I always try to think of concepts like that where it's like, okay, this is separate, this is a result, not the source, but all of my theories lead me back to a cyclical universe where the ultimate manifestation of free will and the awakening of Azeroth, or whatever she is basically the inevitable end point. And like that is what leads to the shattering and the conflict happening again, and why the cycle
Ragnarok,
keeps
basically.
exactly why
Yeah,
the
'cause she's
cycle
gonna
keeps
wake up and
repeating.
destroy it.
Yep.
That's interesting,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. And that ties well
Well,
into Azathoth. So
I had a thought here about like besides A&R using Sessional to maybe accidentally create old gods, she could be using Sessional to go create like world trees type stuff. But then I was just had a thought here about, well, if Azeroth and Argus were like in some sort of eternal conflict before they went to sleep, was Argus bleeding at all? Like maybe he bled across reality, which is
yeah.
and that seeds the old gods on all of, like that could be the quote unquote eruption of them flying across the cosmos, is like the god of the great dark bleeding because he's being assaulted. I don't know. That's just
Yeah,
an interesting
wounded
thought
and
process.
basically like fragments of him falling out and like kind of like what happened to Yashiraj allegedly. You know, he gets ripped out and
Yeah.
he's so like fucked up that like his blood's falling all over the place, his heart falls out, like all this crazy shit. So yeah, I mean
And
I could get behind that.
the black blood are equaling the Argus blood, like somebody just said there in
Yep.
your chat,
Yep.
was like, I was gonna get like, so this idea of the alien lore and the engineers is kind of relevant because they did directly use the terminology of mutagen in Azkahed,
They
which
did.
so to give you a brief rundown of this, like some of it's not in Prometheus, but if you look at like the mural on the wall and then read some of like the behind the scenes scripts, there's like this indication that these engineer race was so advanced, but they had kind of lost their ability to procreate. And so through experiments, they create like a face hugger or they find one of the face huggers. And one of the engineers sacrifices himself and to be basically, get inseminated by the chest burster. And then this chest burster was revered to them like a god because it was the first time they were ever able to create life again in like forever. And it turned out that this blood, like if you watch Prometheus, it opens with this kind of white engineer guy. And he takes off his hood and he's on like by a waterfall and he's given this vial. Opens the vial and it's like this sort of metallic looking liquid he drinks and his body decomposes and then you see like DNA reforming in the river afterwards. It's like, oh, he seeded the planet with the life by killing
The strands
himself
of
with whatever
DNA.
this yeah, with whatever this goo was. And so it turns out that this goo is the blood of the god that came out of this chest. So basically, they call it the deacon. And so what I'm going to get at here is sort of this idea that eventually, like, it's a xenomorph, let me tell you. It's like basically the first xenomorph that they encounter.
What's a xenomorph again?
Well, in Xenomorph and Alien, like the one from Aliens, like the
big black ones?
guy with the long head. Yeah,
Yeah,
those
okay,
are
okay.
xenomorphs. And so in this case, they start experimenting with this black blood of the first god, which actually can create life, as we've seen, like it seeds planets, and they end up creating abominations like the xenomorphs. They create a synthetic version of this black goo, which is what's featured in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and then even in the newest movies, spoiler. But for Alien Romulus, they kind of hint at it. Basically, they call it a mutagen in a lot of the cases. I think of it is. And so it's
So
the
you kind of
xenomorphs
relate
are,
that black blood mutagen to the old god's black blood?
yeah, I think that they might have been making a little bit of an intentional reference, and it's not totally unthinkable because I think StarCraft, some of the references there with like how the Zerg are called essence of purity, and then the Protoss are essence of form. I think
I
if you look
love
at purity
that
of
lore,
form,
dude.
purity of essence. Pardon me,
Oh,
I had it back. The wording was
yeah.
wrong. So purity of essence, and
Yeah.
in the
That's
original
sick.
Alien movie, which, like, by the way, if you ever watch Metzin's Geek Is speech, he says that Ripley from Alien is the undisputed baddest chick in the universe. So he does love this franchise, and it's
Okay.
probably
Guy is such a nerd, dude. He's watched and read
yeah,
everything, dude.
right, right.
It's
I know
fucking
it's inspiring.
crazy. It is, dude.
Uh,
Like, how does he consume so much media, dude?
yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Uh,
Anyway, continue.
in the original Alien, the AI robot, he does say it drops this line. He says, "I admire its purity." The fact that it's like the perfect organism is what he's saying. Like that. So there's like in the original Alien movie, there's an android who gets up like kind of betraying the crew and sort of because he admires the alien. He doesn't know what it is, but his job is to basically capture it or its blood. And so we see some of that kind of follow through when Ridley Scott makes these Prometheus movies and explains that like they accidentally built bioweapons and stuff, and then there's some subplot where they were going to come back and use it on humans because we were terrible, but that's besides the point. It's more
That's
so the
kind of like
idea of
Halo
like
too,
a
to a
little
degree.
bit, yeah, yeah, with the logic plague and siding with the flood there.
Yeah.
If you look into the AI that did that,
Yeah.
in this case, I guess I would consider the mutagen aspect, the fact that it's transformative, the black blood is being
Right.
used like to create these. Like it feels like it's in line with the StarCraft thing where the Zerg could transform, but like they had what was called purity or purity of essence. I think was the one for them because they could change any form but remain the same thing technically, and then purity of form was different for the.
That's almost like Dreadlord versus Eridar. And those are the two races that I kind of come back to when I think of those. Because Protoss is one of them, like you said, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, Eridar would be one. That's purity of form, and then Dreadlords would be purity of essence, where they can take any form, but at the core they're always the same. Holy fuck, dude! They can even take corruption on, and they claim that they're still not fucking bound to it. Think about that with Lothraxian. I don't know. Is that stupid? Is that like kind of a, is that maybe, I don't
That's
know.
an interesting comparison. I don't know if the Eridar would match because oh no, I guess no, yeah, that's a good point.
They're
Oh,
like
that's interesting.
they're
Half
like the
is human.
perfect for, they're like an ordered demon. You know, like that's like, how do you even, they're like the most advanced civilization we've ever seen. They're, I don't know. I feel, and again, they're like WoW's version of Protoss, I think. So I feel like
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
that would align well. But yeah, anyway, yeah,
No,
just
I see what you're saying now. That's a good
and
point. Yeah,
and
yeah.
and also, wasn't it? Hasn't Metzen gone back and forth at one point? They changed it at one point where they said that the Eridar were the reason why Sargeras got corrupted, and then they changed it to the Dreadlords. Not that that has to mean anything, but it's interesting that there's already been connections in terms of like how the lore is structured between the Eridar and the Dreadlords historically. And
Yeah.
also, we connect Argus to, well, obviously the planet Argus, but also the Shadowlands, and that's where the Dreadlords are found, and the Eridar are found on Argus. Like, wait a second. Like, wait a second. That's kind of, I might have to
Yeah.
look into that.
Well, what you said about Order to Demons is interesting because I was also
Yeah.
thinking like, oh, it'd be fun to do a like a couple of videos about like the origins of races and maybe what we don't know about them. And Draenei and Eridar were a big one on my list. That I was like, oh, I should probably talk to Pyro about Argus though, because all of this stuff I'm thinking about where uh, the Sylvan and Satyr are very similar to Draenei in a lot of ways. Like they grow tails, they have hooves and horns, and they've come from the planet that might
Yeah.
be representative of life and chaos and stuff. And uh, in this case, there could be what you're saying about Order to Demons, especially through Arcane. You know, whatever they did, where they turned into a society much like Ajara did. You know, to some
Yeah,
degree.
they had a great
And
library, apparently. Huge library. The biggest,
was-
some would say the biggest library on Nathreza. Not the Sylvan, but the Dreadlords, I mean.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Taro just said that weird that you bring this up now. I was wondering, sort of doing alchemy in WoW, and guess what? Mutagens are a prominent feature.
Yeah, there's a
You
lot of
know,
those right now, I think. Ominous mutagen,
right.
volatile, mercurial mutagens, depending on what you transmute, you get them.
Yeah, so I was thinking with the old gods, I guess, is more comparable perhaps to the xenomorphs as like an
Sure.
accident of trying to replicate creation because they were given the one source, which is Argus, so to speak, but they don't know how to use it properly. And so then trying to like
Yes.
create world trees and stuff that
Oh,
might
that's such a
result
good
in
idea. That they've attempted to use like creation to like write something new, but it's like that they don't have the full scope of it. They don't have the full product, and so they create like a cursed, malformed creation. I like
yeah, and a
that.
part of that might be refusing the fact that life is so intrinsic to this. So like, wait, I mean, maybe they do understand that life is the chaotic part of it, but that shadow and life can't be separated might really irritate them, you know? Because why does light? Oh well, maybe that explains why life thrives off of light because it's its shadow inherently. So this goes back to the whole necrophotic symbiotes thing, right? They're eating
Yes,
life.
dude. Oh my god, Uldaman comes back again. Holy fuck,
It
vanilla
sounds
WoW
like
lore is
trees,
crazy.
dude.
Yeah.
When you read what that Oldemon guy says, it sounds like he's just describing a tree almost, like in a way, like the trees eat light. So
And I have long believed that they just love to do that shit where they'll just use big words to try to describe things that are rather simple because it's from a perspective of something like a fucking robot. So it's like it's trying
mhm.
to describe, yes, like what is something like a tree, but it doesn't understand that it could just call it a tree. So we don't interpret it that way at all. I like that a lot. In
And it
them,
might not be their perfect idea of a tree either. They
no.
might kind of think like what we get to see, like in the Emerald Dream. It's a good point. I saw someone saying like on the new Haranir video I did, like, oh, I don't want to go to an Emerald Dream zone again. We just had one, and it had me thinking about how one note that zone is. But it's beautiful. I love
It
the
is.
zone design, but it's kind of by design, like on a narrative level,
It
that
is.
it's one note.
Yes.
Yeah, it should be ever changing because if you read the preface bit about the Emerald Dream, it sounds like a mushrooms trip. It's ever
Oh
changing
yeah,
and flowing
dude.
and intangible
Oh
from
yeah.
every second to the next.
And
But
and
that's never what we've seen.
you even run into entities in the dream there that are like, why is the dream not changing? Like, I'm here
Yeah,
to tend the gardens, but the gardens never change.
yeah,
What am I
yeah.
fucking, and they're going mad. Like, they're literally going mad. And I think that's, I love that idea that like, I think dreaming is a really big part of all this because I think dreaming is basically this game's equivalent of Sadir, which is like a Norse magic that's
Mhm.
used to see the future. And I think that ENR has it. I think she has the capacity for the dreaming magic, and Odin and also one of his brothers have it as well. It's considered like a feminine magic, and so I really think ENR uses it. And it's believed that Golveg, the golden, lady who may have corrupted the Vanir or been corrupted by the Aesir by way of gold, and may have started the conflict between the Aesir and Vanir to spark that war. She basically brings that magic to them and teaches it to them, and so.
I think she learned it from Argus, because if he's the dreamer,
Oh, that's
what
such
does
a good
Argus
idea.
panoptes means the all-seeing eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have dream sight to see everything, then that would fit for that too.
Could have learned it from
Um,
Argus. Could have learned it if she isn't Elune. She could have learned it from Elune, or something like that.
yeah.
But I really
It
like.
is interesting that the Lune's legacy part is something with the Luna here, which I had to wrestle with here, because I'm like, well, how does that relate if she's
Oh,
planting part of Argus? Or yeah, go
yes,
ahead.
yeah. This actually, yes, this is what I was actually. Sorry, my brain just goes all over the place. This is actually what I was trying to say. I'm so glad you said that again. Where I was actually intending to go with that is the unseeming is something that's like really fascinating to me, and I think obviously it
Yeah.
links to something like the Emerald Nightmare. But the concept of world trees, to me, they're always steeped in magic. They're always steeped in beauty and in the order of nature and like grandeur and stuff. And I just think it's fascinating to consider like what if that's kind of just an illusion, like on the outside, like kind of like the Emerald Dream, where we see it held in stasis and it's beautiful and that's great, but the truth is that there's an underlying need for rot, and whether we see it happening or not, I think it might still be happening, like underneath the surface, like kind of the
Mhm.
disgusting truth that we kind of can't comprehend is really the case. Like the Emerald Dream is beautiful and it's held in stasis, but the reality of it is that it's a fucking nightmare underneath. And so I guess where I was going with that is that like maybe in reality and on the outside, these trees and things like maybe Aluna here appeared as though they were beautiful or benevolent or something, but the truth underneath, the truth that's missing and that no one can see, is that it's actually a malignant, virulent kind of parasite that's being planted in there, because maybe like what you're saying, maybe the essence of creation or how it's been utilized is not correct, and as a result, it's led to horrors arising. But I basically was just trying to say that like that the green trees with the purple, pretty purple flowers and stuff might be rather like illusory, and that they're maybe they don't.
Right.
It's not actually what they are. But yeah, just a thought. I don't know. Just I don't know. It could also just be the result of nature and order and it being held in that state. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do think, regardless, in order for it to be true life and to actually be sustained by natural cycles, decay must be a thing. Otherwise, it's just being sustained by magic, and at that point, is it really even alive?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, the Fazandi stuff, and then other like that's still so interesting about why are the old gods being seated around in the first place, if they are related to world trees and spore mounds more so. Because like I totally like I agree with you. Before we ever heard of Fazandi, I would have been like on the train almost 100% that like, oh yeah, Titans probably seeded these things here and lied about it. But it is a
Yeah.
bit weird. The one thing I can think of to rationalize it under the concept of just the great dark beyond being a chaotic realm is that even Argus's children are fighting against each other. So old gods and druids aren't necessarily going to get along because they're from the chaos god. You know, uh, there's something to that perhaps. The old gods, demons, and druids are all from the same god, but he's a chaos god. So whoop de doo.
I
That could
thought
be. That could.
either that, or I thought maybe them, slithering down far enough or connecting with Azeroth or something like that maybe gave them a semblance of free will, and as a result of that they just battled, um instead of working in unison to do the alleged void lords thing or whatever. They fight. They have empires or so. I don't know. Obviously we
Hmm.
link mortality to free will as well, so it's like Argus can be linked into that, but also I feel like Azeroth is also clearly exhibiting
The
like the
soul
capacity.
part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I had to wrestle that. That's why I was thinking, like, well, wait a minute. That is the factor, though. Is that it's a soul is what gave them free will? Because she doesn't give the earthen flesh in that moment, although she very well could. So it does seem a little bit sus to me. Like maybe we assume that she could. Maybe she can't though, as well. Maybe flesh isn't something Azeroth can give as easily. But like, why did Magni turn back into flesh? It might have just been that he was like holding the energy that
Kind of
surged
like
out of him to the
Khadgar?
spell.
Was he transmuted into diamond? And then maybe she transmuted him back?
I guess so. Yeah, the Khadgar thing is pretty specific. In my mind, I was like, wait a minute, how does that work? Because nothing else could like get coded in. But I wonder if he just turned himself into ones and zeros effectively. You know what I mean? And then was able to sort of reconstruct it. I had a. Actually, what's relevant is thinking about that as being a fractal for what Norganon did when Sargeras got all
Yep.
of them. Did
Yep.
he like turn them into pure arcane? And then so that was pretty
And
interesting.
that
It was
and
like
that in itself kind of scares me. It's like, to take that form, are you, as like a Titan, are you are you forced to retain that form if you do that, or can you move it at free will? I'm fine with that not being the case, but like, I like the concept of like some kind of permanent result of that. But yeah, either way, like her, like if Magni's body is basically held in stasis as a result of a transmutation curse, where basically it transmutes him into diamond, and then Azeroth basically undoes that. But yeah, I don't know. Just a yeah,
It could have just been a bargain, right? Because otherwise,
yeah,
those were about to be technically become Argus's scar. What are they called? Scarden? Yeah.
yeah, Skarden.
If you think about it, if the darkness and the void powers do stem from her dark brother Argus, in that case, he was like, you know what? Like they can have autonomy as long as they still think they can follow me, because that's worked.
Yeah,
Usually my keepers would keep them in order,
true.
uh,
Yeah, fair. The
right,
thing
with their
that
memory crystals.
like screws me up about it all is the void is still seemingly kind of like seeking to integrate with creation or consume it. And that's like what gets me, is that when you see the world soul, it's already got hints of blue in it. We already see when the flames happen that it's got like the blue flames. And that's where I get a little lost with like how the Argus and Void connect, because it's like, well, it seems like Azeroth is already melded together. Like it seems like that's already done. So then what is the void? Like, is the void actually part of it? Is it the darker part of the psyche? Because I guess in my mind,
Wow, this is
I
crazy.
I
Keep up the
don't
sick content,
know
bro.
that I believe that she needs the void to balance herself out at this point. Like, I kind of think that she's already got the components that she needs. And that's why I always get kind of like stuck on like, then what the fuck is the void doing? Like,
Hmm.
but that's also rooted in concepts of like, is the holy light and the void as we know them the actual light and darkness of the cosmos, which is just speculation. So it can't really be, yeah, I don't know. I
Well,
don't
yeah,
know.
that new Paltawar stuff, kind of Palantar, however you say that, it would indicate that like shades of it probably are closer than others, if I had to bet. So what we see is that the cosmic void would, because it looks like it's shattering reality. I don't know, something about that
Yeah,
seems like
like
it's
the
almost
glass.
on the edge of. Yep, yeah. Maybe it's like that's the closest representation to like the shadow, the one in the beginning
Oh,
that we've ever seen. It's because it's like even the opening bit says like the pure shadow manifests only as shades of its presence as the void magic. You're like, what? Like
but
which
in
one is
that
which?
way, when I hear things like pure, and we learned in that same codex that individual powers are unstable. Like it's better that two powers are more bind together for greater stability, right?
Right.
So maybe the void is just like the most unstable version of the darkness, like the purified. In this way, it's hard for me to not relate it to order, to be honest with you, because it's like like it doesn't pure doesn't mean true, and that's the thing for me, is that like just because it's pure and focused into that level of darkness doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it's supposed to be. And so in this way, like the Drust, for instance, Thros, it exists in the Emerald Dream at a unique confluence of death and void, according to Chronicle, which is so fucking weird to say. That's such a weird fucking sentence to say, but it makes me think like, I guess these days I just get stuck into that mode of like, are these forces supposed to exist in this pure of a manifestation? And is Xalatath as pure of a manifestation as I think she is, or am I yet again confused? Um, I just don't know. I just don't know. did these forces come to exist first and come together to make other forces, or did other forces exist that were ordered and separated into different forces that are now so pure and so
Concentrated.
yeah, they're just so concentrated and unstable that like maybe that's the problem, is that we should have more para-elemental forces and quasi-elemental forces rather than unique forces, because when they're just by themselves, they're insane. They all do insane shit.
Yeah, that could be related to like what the Titans, if we think it's them, have done with the Zereth network, the Zereth matrix, if you will, and because if their second stage of reality is one that looks a lot more artificial and divided. I'm just trying to think of how it
Cosmos
relates.
divided kind of
Yeah.
shit. Like maybe in this way, like the cosmos being divided and leading to the inevitable consumption of it by the void is the problem. Like
Yeah.
our lack of understanding of the void and the fact that it's not integrated into anything is a problem, because then it exists only in its purest form, rejected and outcast like Xalatath, and it's coming back with a fucking vengeance, isn't it? And that's the problem of like, it's been neglected, it's been rejected, it's purified to the point where it's pure suffering, despair, and madness, just the same way that the light has been purified into this hideous form of dogmatic, alleged virtue and blind faith and those kinds of things. The way order is completely acting out of turn at this point, and like potentially, right? So yeah, I quite like that interpretation personally. And that's why mortals are so good. Sorry.
Yeah, because they are no, you're right.
They're
Like,
everything.
even what the dragon was saying, how weird it's like the confluence of these forces,
Yeah.
and somehow even the Titans didn't understand that would be a better thing to have the merging
Yeah.
of them.
Empathy,
that
love,
maybe
compassion.
because of it, we actually have extra senses, so to speak.
Yes.
That we can
yes.
be smarter than them.
Exactly.
Yes. Aluneth says at one point that the Jara's people had the potential to rival even the Titans themselves at one point, which is so wild to me. Like that.
Yeah,
the mortal Kaldarai.
And that's because I think it's because, and maybe Sargeras has pursued these, or maybe this is why he's more powerful in some ways, but I think it's because we have closer connections to faith. We have closer connections to conviction and to love and compassion and empathy. This is why, we fight for home and for family. We have those powerful mortal concepts of those things. And while the Titans see it as weak and flesh is weak and whatever, it's not. And that's why I found what Algalon said horrifying and profound at the same time, is that they don't seem to understand that. And my God, I hope they can learn it, because if they can't recognize that, like Algalon says, perhaps it is our perceived weaknesses that which grants us free will, which makes us strong. And
right.
And I really believe that is the case. Like, the story is a big meta allegory for the fact that we as individuals have this power of free will and the ability to control what we might perceive as the divine, and we should seize that, and that's not bad, and that these things that wish to oppress us and take away our free will are truly the great evils.
Yeah, that's why I loved the Shadowlands story, man, because that touches exactly on, like, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but with powers, principalities, and like the princes of darkness and shit. Like, they talk about the idea that our souls are really after what these darkness forces are after if we have a soul. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing valuable but the flesh. We can't take it
it's
with
just a vessel.
They don't want it. Yeah. And so
it's imperfect anyway. That's the point. But it's why the soul's so fucking strong.
Yes, yeah, the willpower to be like, you know what, actually, it's almost like, kids having nightmares and stuff. I think about it in hindsight when I used to be freaked out as a little kid. Sometimes like hide under the blankets and stuff. Like, how is it? In a way, nowadays it sounds goofy, but when I think about that on the scalar level of like, okay, interdimensional demons, forces I do not understand. If you're out there, I don't give a fuck. I have the will of my, like, whatever I have a gift, I can feel it. It's like this sacred fire or whatever, it's like that sort of willpower to be like, I could just form a sphere around myself and you can just disappear into the darkness. It's totally an imaginary gameplay thing. Like, but
I love
willpower, that. If you don't consider it, you are vulnerable. You know what I mean? If you don't consider that the darkness is after you at all, then you'd be completely left open to it. So
exactly. And then you fall prey to it and that's what's happened with many of the Arathi, is that in a way, their virtue and faith blinds them to, sometimes they go from so radical to so radical because there's no shift between, right? But then you have some of the Arathi, for instance, that have learned some of those lessons of the darkness and have kind of they've decided, we're going to do our own thing. We're going to pursue this. We're maybe not going to follow the exact will of the emperor anymore because maybe that's not what we should be doing. Maybe that's not what we desire. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that what we desire is evil or that it's against the emperor or that we want to, destroy whatever that is over there, but maybe we just need to form our own path. And I feel that that's reflected very well in things obviously like the Earthen, some of the other Arathi and Inaj Kahet with the Nerubians.
With the Xalatath and the Void stuff happening with the Nerubians.
Yeah, I
on
mean,
their end. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like those, like the Weaver and them that look at, they're even though she's queen, and there are those who would undoubtedly, like the Emperor, undoubtedly just kneel to that authority. They look at that and say, like, look, I'm sure that there's a reason for that, but it's not for us. And so, like, whether it's straying from the authority of the crown, or whether it's straying from the old ways with the old gods, they apparently had back in the day. I just think and with the Earthen straying from the edicts, it's all similar to me in terms of like betraying the power structure because free will is more important than sacrificing yourself for something that you don't fucking believe in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, actually, that's
yeah.
what the Earth. Yeah, you're right. The Earth and stuff was kind of a hinty at that a little bit. Like most of us don't even think the Titans are going to return at this point. So why are we still toiling?
Yeah, like there's
Yeah,
one
it
person
is.
whose text you talked to me says,
Holy hell,
uh,
almost 3 years.
all
Get out of here.
was it
It
respect the
hasn't been
Titans or
that long.
vener?
I refuse
Hold on.
to believe time moves that fast.
Thank you, Tacitus, for the 35-month resub, man. I appreciate it. Time does move very fast, dude. Unless you're in the void. Not little. Thanks for the Prime Gaming sub for 19 months. Thank you, guys. Just catching up here. And Trantoni, thanks for the 11 months. I appreciate that. Well, I don't remember what I was saying there.
I guess so wrapped up in things for a second too. We were talking about willpower and the Earthen and the saying that like the Titans might be gone. You were
Oh.
going to say something about venerate.
Yes, yeah. Venerate the Titans, but don't wait up for them or something like that.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and I guess to me, that's kind of like the crux of like faith. And I almost wonder, like, I like the twist of like, why did the Titans do it? Did they expect that the Earthen were going to rebel? And to a degree, is it what they wanted? Like,
Isle of Valor style.
yeah, did they, is it orchestrated because they were trying, I don't know, was it an experiment to see if Earthen could derive free will? Was it,
Interesting.
something like that? Like, could they break against the edicts and overcome what we've put in their way? And like, what, maybe it was a study on Azeroth or something else that like, or memories. Maybe it's a study of memories to try to figure out those things. And I don't know, it could be malicious, it could not be, but I always like to keep the possibility in mind of like, what if they wanted them to break the edicts eventually? What if they wanted to see if they were capable of breaking the cycle? Maybe the Titans were running a little simulation about themselves. Can we break out of this? Can we ever get free will? Like, I don't know.
Who are the heretics, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's those ones mentioned in the Avaloran area. Like they're probably keepers who like slew another one and then took God out of town or something.
Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah, and I think that's one of the most fascinating things about the world of Azeroth is like the tendency for things upon it to develop free will, and it makes me think like maybe the Titans are trying to get free will or something like that. Or I always like to consider
If
that.
she is the prime world soul that like represents Mortis, Lumen, and Ordis. In that case, the free will thing, that would be how you capture it, I guess. Capture the source of souls. And I've heard you say that many times. You think Azeroth is the source of all souls. And this is a way I'm kind of conceptualizing that. It's like, oh yeah, like if she's at the prime world soul of the Twisting Nether and actually is just in the Great Dark and they're searching to awaken her so she can destroy the Great Dark, basically to order the Great Dark more so. But they would want, we know what that looks like.
And I
it's
I like
interesting
that idea. Sorry.
that they would capture the soul, like it was, capture the soul of the universe basically, and then you have free will because you can order it at that point. You can, and maybe that's what all the machines are. I mean, I think the that's the Forge of Origination and the Forge of Wills, right, is said to actually shape and mold the budding essence or the budding sentience of the world soul. It doesn't even sound very good. It sounds
No,
frustrating, but
no,
it is
it
right.
does not. And one interpretation is that with all these cosmic languages, the Titans are maybe masters of the kind of matrix code, as it were, in reality. They have supreme control over the code, if you will, the magical code that makes up everything. Besides maybe Azeroth. And so one idea is that the Titans have created these extremely pure forces, potentially, or ordered them into them. And something like the Void consuming Azeroth is maybe kind of like a virus corrupting something that is kind of like pure, so to speak, or like an administrative override, so to speak, where like they create something that is even more powerful than domination. In that, if the heroes of Azeroth fall to despair, the world too will fall to the void, and the code will basically overwrite the world soul, and potentially have terrible permanent consequences as a result of it. But that's, I don't know, just one interpretation of like different magics and different corruption styles, or maybe different levels of admin access, and like maybe the Titans are trying to develop something that is of such high level, kind of admin access, as it were, for a computer system, that they can access the very heart of creation and overwrite all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
Oh, yeah.
and I think she's resisting that. I mean, that's exactly what Zoval tried to do. Of like, let me use domination. I'm going to link all this shit together. I'm going to overwrite all of it. But then it didn't work, and a lot of that has to do with us, but also, obviously Azeroth.
Yeah, that kind of seemed like a reveal that went under the rug or like under the radar for people. Is that when we waltz into the heart of eternity and see Zoval about to attempt to, as far as he's concerned, he's convinced he will be able
Yeah,
to
he's fully convicted.
rewrite the universe.
Yes.
It makes you realize, oh, the Titans already did this. They did this already because
Yes.
they otherwise they're just bad at their job.
Yep. It's a
So
fractal. They've
it's a
already
huge
done it.
reveal.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
and the fact that Azeroth's power is directly used to do it is like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah, yeah, and it looks like reorigination and
yeah,
yeah.
universal scale. Like, and again, Rigelon showing up, making the comments about through death will come order, the world or the universe will be reordered. Like, that is so unbelievably Titan coded. It's all blue order magic, domination magic. We have inkling that the Primus is fucking in on it, or all
Yeah.
that shit. So it's
And
not a good look for the Titans.
what's fun with that is that even Zoval's dominated will, let's say, because I think of it a lot of the time, it can be kind of corruptive. Like the story they may have shown there was like right up to the. I know there'll be some disagreements. Like maybe he was no longer dominated by the point of the last minute, like when he's dying, literally. Or I kind of see it like Sylvanas' eyes seem to imply that she was waiting for him to take on like a good-looking form again, and that just doubled down, kind of like Sargeras did. That's always a fractal I've seen. Is that at some point Sargeras probably could have turned things around and stopped trying to be like just the destroyer. He might have been able to use Argus, even like in this theory, for actual regeneration and understanding it better. And then same with Zoval. Like at some point, after too long have I endured the Maker's flawed design, he says,
Right.
and it's like his will is twisted regardless of domination. It's almost like a permanent effect that he just thinks this way now and decided. So I guess my long form point was though is that he's still getting a Titan perspective on what Zoval might want the new cosmos to be, or why he thinks it's wrong. Even.
Yep.
These things could be Titan coded perspective for us to read into, which is
Yeah.
because he's a puppet, and that's undeniable. Like,
I absolutely agree. I think, and I really think that the way that the story writing in Shadowlands was handled is really poor. One of my mods and friends, Matt, put together a rewrite of Shadowlands in which he basically positions Zoval as this grand harbinger of truth and of equality and justice, and how that was basically broken and perverted to the point where, okay, motherfuckers, everyone is guilty now. Everybody's guilty. None of you are none of you are clean. And as a result, you're all going to be dominated.
well, he was the arbiter of
Exactly.
judgment, so it totally
Yep.
fits in. I've thought about this before, that even everything that we do see play out kind of makes sense if he was the
And-
arbiter, because he felt he had the right to make the choice.
In what was he doing effectively? When souls came into the Shadowlands and were sent out in the realms or judged by him, what what is he effectively doing? To me,
Dividing. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
well, to me, he's ordering it. He's
Yes,
he's
yes.
yeah,
Sorting. Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah,
yeah.
sorting it out. He's literally commanding, you go here, this is this, giving judgment, right? And that for that to be stolen from him and given to the arbiter, something that didn't have opinions, didn't didn't have any agency at all. I just think is pretty fucking telling. It
It's interesting though
yeah.
that even his dialogue implies that he started to find his own logic was flawed. Like he had the choice to send these, like, or rather, he was just like in the middle of it, and he had to witness it, but he didn't really have control over whether or not a soul was worthy of Revendreth or the Maw. He just was the guy who sent them there and witnessed it in a way, right? Like what I've started to perceive is it's almost like he's the one who has had the flawed logic, and he started to go, wait a minute, why am I thinking this way? Like
Yeah, and
this
that
isn't right. Like who made me think this way?
it could, yeah, it could be of like, how the fuck did I get here? Like, wait. This is a shadow. Yeah, this is a
I've
shadow
wondered
of.
about that. Like, what did something ever slam into Zoval the Arbiter the way Argus's spirit did and wake him up at some point? Did he ever just like all of a sudden like how five-year-olds they talk about that joke where it's like you gain consciousness? You know,
I
like,
don't.
what was it about Zoval where he went from being like an automa probably who was doing his job to suddenly being ensouled and like this isn't right?
Well, it's said in Chronicle Volume 4 that it was due to his interactions with the mortal souls that he had
Right.
witnessed things in these lives in people's past that alarmed him and made him believe that's some extraneous, all destroying or consuming or whatever force was coming. And they're such fuckers about that. They won't tell you what that really means. And I mean, I
Hmm.
kind of felt like it's referring to the void. The ultimate consumption or control of the universe is going to happen if everything is divided. And I think right at the end when we're defeating him, it's so fascinating because we're witnessing memories from Zoval as he's falling, but some of the memories, at least the very last one, appears to be from someone else. And
Yeah.
it appears that that is from the Primus, obviously. And so, it's really sounds like the disruption of Zoval's soul, and frankly, he could even be a fragment of someone else. Like he could be the dark fragment of fucking Argus, and Argus could then be the dark fragment of Azeroth, and so on and so forth. I have no fucking idea, but the main point really is that like, well, I don't really know what the main point was.
No, no, it's interesting. I actually just thought about Zoval here now as being maybe could be more aligned with Azeroth in this kind of chart's depiction of the light, death, and order side of things. That he would be the death guy who's using probably the wisdom of light to order stuff. If you know what I mean, like the sort
Yeah,
of nuance there of all those three forces intermingling at the Shadowlands
and they
and
should.
and
Death,
actually, yeah.
faith, hope, acceptance, sacrifice, like
Oh, totally,
order,
yeah, yeah.
fairness, judgment, all of those things.
There was something interesting I almost forgot to mention earlier. We were talking about the idea of the Titans creating the Shadowlands as a way to
Thank you so much,
impose their
Fox, for the
order on
40-month
what would be like the
resub.
primordial
Thank you.
chaos dream of Argus or whatever. And there would be. It's interesting because the idea of the astral dimension, and then sort of like that's where they come from, and then they try to create an afterlife that's like where they came from for us almost,
Yeah, like
even though.
eternal and beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
Like they tried to
exactly.
turn the afterlife into Elysium, and this is
Yeah,
why I think the afterlife, the Shadowlands, used to be completely different. And honestly, it's part of why I think it's really cool if the old gods came from there, at least a couple of them, because I really wanted the Shadowlands to be realms of nightmarish decay, as described in Chronicle, and that's not what it was. I wanted the Black Forest. I wanted
right.
I wanted all of that, and I believe that that's probably what the Shadowlands used to be, but not anymore. Not anymore.
I guess you could, yeah, could arguably still have the same name, yeah, like the Emerald Dream and the Shadowlands could just be part of in a way, the primordial force that Argus is inhibiting out. Because if he's both like shadow and life, that would kind of fit there.
It
Um,
could, or you could even take like Azeroth and give her to one and Argus to the other. Like you can always have the duality
yeah.
aspect going with it too.
One of the things that popped up in my mind here, we were talking a little bit, thought about like about stasis and change, is is the idea of the dream not like changing and how it's supposed to be is indicative of transformation and back to the sort of original thing I brought up here about if you think about it, the druids are the transformers in this
Yeah.
story. They're the actual good guys, and they're coming from the creator god who would be Argus. That's pretty just funny stuff there. It's all about like they're
Yeah, they're
locking stuff up.
and the relationship between gods in things is always muddy. So like
Yeah.
you never know. We can have gods that are brother and sister that technically have offspring or have their own individual offspring. Like that shit can happen too. So there's so much opportunity for them to expand upon the relationship between the gods, and I'm so glad that regardless of wherever they go with it, that they're making it clear that like they're not all one and the same, and that they might have different goals and aspirations. And I like that because it reopens the door to me that like someone like Eonar can actually be a good guy or good character, whatever. And that someone like Aman'Thul can be a bad guy, and like they don't have to just be the same at any given time, that individually they are also still characters.
Yeah. Which is gray area with almost all of Azeroth, Azeroth and the Warcraft's characters in general.
Yeah, and especially the high ranking ones of cosmic forces like Naru and old gods and stuff. Really, all of those things are still rather obscure to us. Like the one that's been the most expanded upon is the Eternals, and unfortunately that didn't go well for most people. So I mean,
No.
thematically, it's just thematically Shadowlands is super creative, and I like the idea, but it just needed a little more clear execution, I think. And they also needed to just make the Primus the bad guy, and they just didn't do that. So I just don't really understand what happened there. But hopefully they're saving him for something really cool later, because what the fuck.
Well, he's got to show up in the last Titan.
Oh,
Like as
sure.
soon as he made the Crown of Wills, I
That's
knew
so
that was going to
fucked.
play a link to the Forge of Wills. It's like there's going to be something about that, and even thinking about the origination beam. Actually, this is just an idea I might as well float past you. But if there is any correlation between Ungro Crater being like an impact crater for the Beledar, and then you have Sholazar Basin, which also has these crystals, it is harder to explain like one exists and the other for different reasons.
I agree.
But I was thinking about the Forge of Origination having its big beam, though, that shoots right up. When we kill N'Zoth, we use the Azerite, like the heart of Azeroth area.
Mhm.
And when Zoval tries to use his Zereth stuff in Shadowlands, so I'm losing my train of thought type, but not train of thought, my verbalage is not coming.
It's okay.
You have this big, what looks like origination beam going up the spire of Ice Crown. And what if there's some sort of a link? This is just a kind of offshoot between there being like two Beledar-like things in the
Yep.
planet. And when we go back to in the last Titan, that's part of the conspiracy, is we realize that these things might be involved in the soul harnessing. That part of like whatever happens when you re-originate or when
love that.
Yeah.
I would love that. Like they consume, because it's it's kind of how I thought about the world trees before, is that they were big spirit traps. So like when people died, they were nets that were catching the spirits and basically feeding on them or keeping them for whatever reason. So the idea that maybe those crystals are part of some kind of cycle of like consumption or creation or something like that down there is fucking sick. And I'm gonna be honest, the fact that the mural is depicted with the old god with the crystal up in the sky in the background, and like the fact that the other fucking Nerubians went up north and that Sholazar's up there as well, would not be surprised if in the last Titan we also found, another underground or underwater or something like that zone or crystal that the Nerubians were attracted to up there or something like that. Because at this point, I do think that there is a chance that we're going to find more of them. My main concern with Beledar at the moment is trying to understand why it is seemingly putting out the Radiant song to some people. And Shinzai, one of my mods, expressed that he thinks that perhaps it's akin to like a resonant crystal, where like it's just repeating it's kind of mimicking or repeating the signal being sent by Azeroth. So I don't know what you think about that, but just one of the ideas I've heard come around. But I do think that there's probably going to be more of these fucking things. There might be 5 of them. There might be 4 of them. 5 would work very well. 4 would actually work better. And how they relate to the old gods then could be very good, and because then you're tying in the myth of the 5 sons and all that shit. So
Yeah, I think the song seems. I think it comes from within because the earthen show that it comes from within, and even the Haranir Orwania is hearing the song in her head for different reasons that aren't related to Beladar. And so when Anduin looks at Beladar and he hears the radiant song, he gets a radiant vision. I think it's because he is a little bit on set to be used by Azeroth in this whole thing,
Oh, for
and that
sure,
is
dude.
basically just he's gonna have a role with Beladar, and he kind of got a hint of that at that moment. Like, oh, that's important for me. Azeroth just told me that I need to pay attention to that crystal.
Yeah.
Not so much that it came from there. That was my take on that
Yeah.
personally.
No, I like that
Um,
interpretation as well because I really don't want the song to be coming from there. I really like what you're saying, where they kind of describe that Beladar isn't the source of their light, but it's the icon of their faith. It's one of them anyway. And
mhm.
so I like that they would associate divine things or that their interpretation of divine messages would be believed to be coming from that or something like that. Or their connection to the light inherently kind of bridges that there or something. I can definitely get behind that.
Right. And along the lines of there being another crystal too, maybe if this one's now flipping back and forth, perhaps they work in tandem with each other, where one's supposed to be dark and one's supposed to be a light at either time.
Oh, I
And
love this. That's great. That's a
what
great theorization right there. I like that.
it had me thinking, the Forge of Wills is described in Chronicle. It says here, sorry, the Forge of Origination would be installed in the southern reaches of Azeroth, and it would regulate the rhythms of the deep earth and fortify the world soul's form. And I got thinking the
Hmm.
idea that when Sargeras is seemingly what causes the Beladar to start shifting again when he stabs the planet, if stabbing the Forge of Origination, which is just described there, is to regulate the rhythm of the deep earth, and then Beladar starts shifting into a rhythm.
Could be. I also like the idea of heart rhythm and heartbeats.
Yes, that's a
Um,
very yeah.
aim for the heart, spread it through the blood. Maybe it affects everything. Kind of. I don't know. Yeah, the fucking Azerite is the fucking bane of my existence. It's like it's the thing that got me the most excited, and also one of the things that fucking sometimes confuses me the most. I really hope that what they told us that it's like gives off the sensation of creation and destruction is accurate, because otherwise a lot of my theories are like kind of mega fucked up. Um, which
Yeah,
is okay.
maybe not totally, because Azeroth's blood, if she is a Titan, let's say, I think it says like in the very beginning here about Titans, not even in the mythos part, but the preface. Titans are colossal. What does it say? Oh yeah, they roam the cosmos like walking worlds, imbued with the raw power of creation itself. But
Yeah.
we've seen that Titans are extremely capable of destruction, so maybe that's more so the hint is that like we think of them as creator gods, but they're also destroyer gods. A la Sargeras is obvious, but when she's
Well,
holding that, maybe it's the potential to become either one.
and I like that. I like that interpretation because in I liked what you said there about the Titans actually being the destroyers and maybe the more chaotic ones, because in my mind with the inversion of concepts and tropes, that might be what's happening, where like Sargeras is actually the a creator and a fertility god and an order god, rather than, and they're the opposite, and they call him the destroyer, they call Argus the unmaker, but it's like six seats at the high table, six mouths that hunger. I think that they all want maybe they all want something out of, I don't know. There's so many fucking interpretations to it, but back to the rhythm thing, yeah, the forges are obviously super super important. And I think yeah, again, rhythm, it could have to do with Beladar. I'm totally okay with that because it involves maybe stasis, or
Yeah,
something
that's what I
like
was
that.
thinking. That he basically like broke the stasis machines on
Yes.
Beladar. Yeah,
And yes, and that yes. And honestly, I'm not opposed to that happening as a result of it damaging Uldum or what, or an Unguro. Like, all those things are so close together that, like, fuck it, all of it. Like, fuck it.
yeah.
The heart thing, the Argus, the blood, the fucking Belladar, the Forge. Like, fuck it. All of those things. So yeah, I can definitely get behind that. The sword. Have you seen the tarot card of the sword and like what it represents and all
Tower.
that shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fucking
I'm
insane.
excited for those to come out. I know almost
Me
like in
too.
November, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
gonna be sick. Yeah, just the fact that the sword is the tower just blows my fucking mind. And yeah, there's so much good shit there.
Calamity and all that. Yeah. No, that's interesting. The oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. No, I mean, it's been a really good conversation, man. I don't want to take
Yeah.
up too much of your time today here. I guess I probably could wrap up because I can stew on this with a little more like direction in my head. Like, okay, like keep chugging along. Don't because it was. I felt like I reached a point where I'm thinking, am I going to adhere to main canon or this wild idea that I think Pyro might like, you know? And so I was like, jeez, because I was trying to talk to my girlfriend about it, and she was like, because she's learning WoW lore, she's super into it. But then all she had to say was, I don't know, it sounds legit, I guess. And I was like, fuck, that's too confirming. I can't go off of that. I need someone who will either tell me I'm wrong or like the reasons why I might be onto something. So
Yeah,
I
it's my
appreciate, yeah.
pleasure. I I I I will always try to operate within reasonable, you know, reasonable interpretations of what is said to be true. Like, I try very hard not to outright deny certain events ever happening. Um, I just, yeah, I don't know. There's so much context. It's hard. It's like, I get it. It's hard to like, to keep track of and to get, um, cause if you just have a cool idea, even like, people are like, oh yeah, that's a fucking good idea. But it's like, well, but is it unfounded though? Like,
Right, yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, I appreciate that you value my opinion enough to ask me and to run those things by me because yeah, there's some things that even I need to be reminded of and challenged on too because I can't fucking remember. So
No, it's a lot, yeah. No, it'd be fun. Like I think, like I said, I can probably go from here. I don't know if it'd be like my next project, but this would let me work on new projects still in the meantime. But like kind of to build out something to send your way that we could both get in a way like a working form to create some sort of a project on this would be fun because the idea
yeah,
of the Argus, the maker, like thinking about him as regrowth and druidism is really kind of grinding my not grinding my gears in a good way, you know. Like I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, I want to make some of that art, but would it be fruitless? No, it might prove a point now, is what I'm thinking. You know, it's kind of to show that visual, be like, what was he beforehand, and to talk about that because. You know,
And
when I've heard you say you think Eridar ordered demons, like this fits right in with that. So if I wanted to do a video about the origin of Eridar, I'd have to. It all links up.
yeah, yeah, there's so many cool ideas that you can link together like that. And I mean, one other thing to kind of, the tree thing is like or the druid thing is like when Zoval gets his core back, I don't know if really if anyone thinks that this is significant or not, but his chest looks like almost like a log, like a tree trunk or
It does, doesn't it?
like a
Yeah.
drust tree that's had like a hole punched in it or something. And so I just wanted to throw that out there again too of like even in his final empowered domination form, Zoval himself, who we can pretty easily link to Argus, I feel like, has motifs of what I think are like druidism or like drust kind of stuff. So just one last thing to think about, I guess, going into it.
Yeah, going. It's funny. You know the the oracles in Zereth Mortis. Have you ever just compared the top of their head to Argus's crown?
I have not
Obviously, pull up a picture faster than I will here. Trying to think.
like
And they're
Oracle
called.
Caesara.
Yeah, like Oracle Caesar. They have like the same little three partitioned like crest, like a shellfish looking almost. Let's see if I can hear it in the middle of it. You know, like Argus has this like specific looking crest, and it's kind of like a mini version of what the Arbiter has, is what I think they're trying to
Yeah.
echo there. But the Arbiter being linked to Argus to some degree
Oh,
could
I
still make
see.
sense. Yeah.
I think I see what you mean with this screenshot. Dude, they have to be fucking linked. I was so sold. I was like, dude, Argus made the Shadowlands. There's like no question about it to me. And then they did all this shit. And I was like, fuck, it's the first ones. Like, what is that? Cringe. And then I hated Shadowlands so much that I honestly couldn't see it for what it was or what they were trying to do. It also doesn't help that it fucking takes forever for them to get to the end and like show you. But I hated playing it so much that like I just couldn't even appreciate any of this shit. So I like fell off the train there and was like, fuck this. Like I'm not fucking doing this anymore. And then when I came back to WoW and people were like, you need to play Korthia and Zereth Mortis, I was like, okay, dude. And then I got to Zereth Mortis and I was like, holy shit. This zone is literally designed for people like me, dude. Like what
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fuck? So yeah.
I know Fareem is like a sleight of hand on speculators like us. It's like he was written based on people who just mindlessly toil over the fractals,
Yes,
the
dude.
cycles within cycles.
To the
yeah.
point of going mad. By the way, look at this image of Caesara, and look how it basically just looks like Azeroth's world soul behind her. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, geez, look at that.
Let's see, we got the pink.
Yeah, they're sure like forcing her order into the
Yeah.
realms of life or something. No, that's so interesting. But yeah, no, thank you, man.
Yeah,
And I'll let you get back to it here. And it's been a joy. I'm sure we could do this again soon. People seem to enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's try. We'll try to, if we can, we'll try to maybe schedule it next time so more people can be here to like watch and check it out. But yeah, I
Fair
definitely.
enough. So improv too.
Yeah. I definitely think that obviously we have a lot of really similar ideas. I'd love to do something. So if you got something put together or any other things you want to run by me, dude, just always hit me up. And yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and chatting with me.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and thank you, chat, for listening. It's been really fun. So yeah, I'll peace out for now. Go back to the text pleb.
Back, back to the Charlie Day string board. That's what he's going back to.
Bro, pretty much. You're right. No, you're right. I'm gonna just write stuff down, start literally drawing, probably. So yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, cool. We'll catch you later, and yeah, have a good one.
I'll be tuned into the stream. So yeah,
sounds
keep
good.
it up.
I'll see you there. Cool. Damn, that lasted fucking way longer than I thought it was going to. Which is not a bad thing, but holy shit. that was a long time. That was cool. That was nice. Yeah, dude, there's so many. God damn, WoW has just so much lore. It has so much story. It's like, and it's really good to. What I really enjoyed about that conversation, chat, was that Xaxxas has a great way of like voicing his ideas and interpretations and like challenging things without just like shutting them down or like being like a like a canon lore Andy that just like doesn't really operate outside the boundaries of what is expressly stated as canon like at all. And so it's really nice. And he just has such fucking good ideas, and it feels nice because I feel like he understands like what I'm trying to say and my ideas, and it's really nice that I can just rant a little bit, and it's pretty awesome. So yeah, that was nice, dude. And thanks again, to Xaxxas for coming on, and we've talked about chatting and doing something together for a while, so it's cool to see some of that coming to fruition, and yeah, hopefully, you can look forward to more of that stuff. Yeah.